Costa's audiobook presents The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoyevsky. Part 3. Book 9. The Preliminary Investigation. Chapter 1. The beginning of Perhotin's official career. Pyotr Ilyich Perhotin, whom we left knocking at the strong locked gates of the widow Morozov's house, ended, of course, by making himself heard. Venya, who was still excited by the fright she had had 2 hours before, and too much upset to go to bed, was almost frightened into hysterics on hearing the furious knocking at the gate. Though she had herself seen him drive away, she fancied that it must be Dmitri Fyodorovich knocking again. No one else could knock so savagely. She ran to the house porter, who had already waked up and gone out to the gate, and began imploring him not to open it. But having questioned Pyotr Ilyich and learned that he wanted to see Venya on very important business, the man made up his mind at last to open. Pyotr Ilyich was admitted into Venya's kitchen, but the girl begged him to allow the house porter to be present because of her misgivings. He began questioning her and at once learned the most vital fact, that is, that when Dmitri Fyodorovich had run out to look for Grushenka, he had snatched up a pestle from the mortar, and that when he returned, the pestle was not with him and his hands were smeared with blood. And the blood was simply flowing, dripping from him, dripping, Venya kept exclaiming. This horrible detail was simply the product of her disordered imagination. But although not dripping, Pyotr Ilyich had himself seen those hands stained with blood, and had helped to wash them. Moreover, the question he had to decide was not how soon the blood had dried, but where Dmitri Fyodorovich had run with the pestle, or rather whether it really was to Fyodor Pavlovich's, and how he could satisfactorily ascertain. Pyotr Ilyich persisted in returning to this point, and though he found out nothing conclusive, yet he carried away a conviction that Dmitri Fyodorovich could have gone nowhere but to his father's house, and that therefore something must have happened there. And when he came back, Venya added with excitement, I told him the whole story, and then I began asking him, Why have you got blood on your hands, Dmitri Fyodorovich? And he answered that that was human blood, and that he had just killed someone. He confessed it all to me, and suddenly ran off like a madman. I sat down and began thinking, where's he run off to now like a madman? He'll go to Mokrow, I thought, and kill my mistress there. I ran out to beg him not to kill her. I was running to his lodgings, but I looked at Plotnikov's shop and saw him just setting off, and there was no blood on his hands then. Venya's old grandmother confirmed her evidence as far as she was capable. After asking some further questions, Pyotr Ilyich left the house, even more upset and uneasy than he had been when he entered it. The most direct and the easiest thing for him to do would have been to go straight to Fyodor Pavlovich's, to find out whether anything had happened there, and if so, what, and only to go to the police captain, as Pyotr Ilyich firmly intended doing when he had satisfied himself of the fact. But the night was dark. Fyodor Pavlovich's gate was strong, and he would have to knock again. His acquaintance with Fyodor Pavlovich was of the slightest, and what if, after he had been knocking, they opened to him, and nothing had happened? Then Fyodor Pavlovich, in his jeering way, would go telling the story all over the town, how a stranger, called Perhotin, had broken in upon him at midnight to ask if anyone had killed him. It would make a scandal, and scandal was what Pyotr Ilyich dreaded more than anything in the world. Yet the feeling that possessed him was so strong that though he stamped his foot angrily and swore at himself, he set off again, not to Fyodor Pavlovich's, but to Madame Hohlakov's. He decided that if she denied having just given Dmitri Fyodorovich 3,000 roubles, he would go straight to the police captain, but if she admitted having given him the money, he would go home and let the matter rest till next morning. It is, of course, perfectly evident that there was even more likelihood of causing scandal by going at 11 o'clock at night to a fashionable lady, a complete stranger, and perhaps rousing her from her bed to ask her an amazing question, than by going to Fyodor Pavlovich. but that is just how it is, sometimes, especially in cases like the present one, with the decisions of the most precise and phlegmatic people. Pyotr Ilyich was by no means phlegmatic at that moment. He remembered all his life how a haunting uneasiness gradually gained possession of him, growing more and more painful and driving him on against his will. Yet he kept cursing himself, of course, all the way for going to this lady. But I will get to the bottom of it, I will. He repeated for the 10th time, grinding his teeth, and he carried out his intention. It was exactly 11 o'clock when he entered the Madame Hohlakov's house. He was admitted into the yard pretty quickly, but in response to his inquiry whether the lady was still up, the porter could give no answer, except that she was usually in bed by that time. Ask at the top of the stairs. If the lady wants to receive you, she'll receive you. If she won't, she won't. Pyotr Ilyich went up, but did not find things so easy here. The footman was unwilling to take in his name, but finally called a maid. Pyotr Ilyich politely but insistently begged her to inform her lady that an official living in a town called Perhotin had called on particular business, and that if it were not of the greatest importance he would not have ventured to come. Tell her in those words exactly. He asked the girl. She went away. He remained waiting in the entry. Madame Hohlakov herself was already in her bedroom, though not yet asleep. She had felt upset ever since Mitya's visit, and had a presentiment that she would not get through the night without the sick headache which always, with her, followed such excitement. She was surprised on hearing the announcement from the maid. She irritably declined to see him. However, though the unexpected visit at such an hour of an official living in the town, who was a total stranger, roused her feminine curiosity intensely. But this time Pyotr Ilyich was as obstinate as a mule. He begged the maid most earnestly to take another message in these very words, that he had come on business of the greatest importance, and that Madame Hohlakov might have cause to regret it later if she refused to see him now. I plunged headlong. He described it afterwards. The maid, gazing at him in amazement, went to take his message again. Madame Hohlakov was impressed. She thought a little, asked what he looked like, and learned that he was very well dressed, young, and so polite. We may note, parenthetically, that Pyotr Ilyich was a rather good-looking young man, and well aware of the fact. Madame Hohlakov made up her mind to see him. She was in a dressing gown and slippers, but she flung a black shawl over her shoulders. The official was asked to walk into the drawing room, the very room in which Mitya had been received shortly before. The lady came to meet her visitor with a sternly inquiring countenance, and, without asking him to sit down, began at once with the question, "What do you want?" "I have ventured to disturb you, madam, on a matter concerning our common acquaintance, Dmitri Fyodorovich Karamazov," Perhotin began. But he had hardly uttered the name when the lady's face showed signs of acute irritation. She almost shrieked and interrupted him in a fury. "How much longer am I to be worried by that awful man?" she cried hysterically. "How dare you, sir? How could you venture to disturb a lady who is a stranger to you in her own house at such an hour? And to force yourself upon her to talk of a man who came here to this very drawing-room only 3 hours ago to murder me, and went stamping out of the room as no one would go out of a decent house. Let me tell you, sir, that I shall lodge a complaint against you, that I will not let it pass. Kindly leave me at once. I am a mother. I... Murder? Then he tried to murder you too. Why, has he killed somebody else?" Madame Hohlakov asked impulsively. "If you would kindly listen, madam, for half a moment, I'll explain it all in a couple of words," answered Perhotin firmly. "At 5 o'clock this afternoon, Dmitri Fyodorovich borrowed 10 roubles from me, and I know for a fact he had no money. Yet at 9 o'clock he came to see me with a bundle of 100-ruble notes in his hand, about 2,000 or 3,000 roubles. His hands and face were all covered with blood, and he looked like a madman. When I asked him where he had got so much money, he answered that he had just received it from you, that you had given him a sum of 3,000 to go to the gold mines." Madame Hohlakov's face assumed an expression of intense and painful excitement. "Good God! He must have killed his old father," she cried, clasping her hands. "I've never given him money. Never. Oh, run, run. Don't say another word. Save the old man. Run to his father. Run." "Excuse me, madam, then you did not give him money. You remember for a fact that you did not give him any money." No, I didn't. I refused to give it him, for he could not appreciate it. He ran out in a fury, stamping. He rushed at me, but I slipped away. And let me tell you, as I wish to hide nothing from you now, that he positively spat at me. Can you fancy that? But why are we standing? Sit down. Excuse me, or better, run. Run. You must run and save the poor old man from an awful death. But if he has killed him already? Oh, good heavens, yes. Then what are we to do now? What do you think we must do now? Meantime, she had made Pyotr Ilyitch sit down and sat down herself, facing him. Briefly, but fairly clearly, Pyotr Ilyitch told her the history of the affair, that part of it at least which he had himself witnessed. He described, too, his visit to Fenya, and told her about the pestle. All these details produced an overwhelming effect on the distracted lady, who kept uttering shrieks and covering her face with her hands. Would you believe it? I foresaw all this. I have that special faculty. Whatever I imagine comes to pass. And how often I've looked at that awful man and always thought that man will end by murdering me. And now it's happened. That is, if he hasn't murdered me, but only his own father. It's only because the finger of God preserved me. And what's more, he was ashamed to murder me because in this very place I put the holy icon from the relics of the holy martyr, Saint Varvara, on his neck. And to think how near I was to death at that minute, I went close up to him and he stretched out his neck to me. Do you know, Pyotr Ilyitch, I don't believe in miracles, but that icon and this unmistakable miracle with me now, that shakes me, and I'm ready to believe in anything you like. Have you heard about Father Zosima? But I don't know what I'm saying, and only fancy, with the icon on his neck, he spat at me. He only spat. It's true, he didn't murder me, and he dashed away. But what shall we do? What must we do now? What do you think? Pyotr Ilyitch got up and announced that he was going straight to the police captain to tell him all about it and leave him to do what he thought fit. Oh, he's an excellent man, excellent. Mikhail Makarovich. I know him. Of course, he's the person to go to. How practical you are, Pyotr Ilyitch. How well you've thought of everything. I should never have thought of it in your place. Especially as I know the police captain very well too, observed Pyotr Ilyitch, who still continued to stand and was obviously anxious to escape as quickly as possible from the impulsive lady who would not let him say goodbye and go away. And be sure, she prattled on, to come back and tell me what you see there, and what you find out, what comes to light, how they'll try him, and what he's condemned to. Tell me, we have no capital punishment, have we? But be sure to come, even if it's at 3 o'clock at night, at 4, at 4:30. Tell them to wake me, to shake me, if I don't get up. But good heavens, I shan't sleep. But wait, hadn't I better come with you? No. But if you would write 3 lines with your own hand, stating that you did not give Dmitri Fyodorovich money, it might perhaps be of use, in case it's needed. To be sure, Madame Hohlakov skipped, delighted, to her bureau. And you know I'm simply struck, amazed at your resourcefulness, your good sense in such affairs. Are you in the service here? I'm delighted to think that you're in the service here. And still speaking, she scribbled on half a sheet of notepaper the following lines. I've never in my life lent to that unhappy man, Dmitri Fyodorovich Karamazov, 3,000 roubles today. I've never given him money, never. That I swear by all that's holy. K. Hohlakov. Here's the note. She turned quickly to Pyotr Ilyitch. Go, save him. It's a noble deed on your part. And she made the sign of the cross 3 times over him. She ran out to accompany him to the passage. How grateful I am to you. You can't think how grateful I am to you for having come to me first. How is it I haven't met you before? I shall feel flattered at seeing you at my house in the future. How delightful it is that you are living here. Such precision, such practical ability. They must appreciate you. They must understand you. If there's anything I can do, believe me. Oh, I love young people. I'm in love with young people. The younger generation are the one prop of our suffering country, her one hope. Oh, go, go. But Pyotr Ilyitch had already run away, or she would not have let him go so soon. Yet Madame Hohlakov had made a rather agreeable impression on him, which had somewhat softened his anxiety at being drawn into such an unpleasant affair. Tastes differ, as we all know. She's by no means so elderly, he thought, feeling pleased. On the contrary, I should have taken her for her daughter. As for Madame Hohlakov, she was simply enchanted by the young man. Such sense, such exactness, in so young a man, in our day, and all that with such manners and appearance. People say the young people of today are no good for anything, but here's an example, etc. So she simply forgot this dreadful affair, and it was only as she was getting into bed that, suddenly recalling how near death she had been, she exclaimed, "Ah, it is awful, awful." But she fell at once into a sound, sweet sleep. I would not, however, have dwelt on such trivial and irrelevant details if this eccentric meeting of the young official with the by no means elderly widow had not subsequently turned out to be the foundation of the whole career of that practical and precise young man. His story is remembered to this day with amazement in our town, and I shall perhaps have something to say about it when I have finished my long history of the Brothers Karamazov. Chapter 2. The Alarm. Our police captain, Mikhail Makarovich Makarov, a retired lieutenant colonel, was a widower and an excellent man. He had only come to us 3 years previously, but had won general esteem, chiefly because he knew how to keep society together. He was never without visitors, and could not have got on without them. Someone or other was always dining with him. He never sat down to table without guests. He gave regular dinners too, on all sorts of occasions, sometimes most surprising ones. Though the fare was not recherché, it was abundant. The fish pies were excellent, and the wine made up in quantity for what it lacked in quality. The first room his guests entered was a well-fitted billiard room, with pictures of English racehorses in black frames on the walls, an essential decoration, as we all know, for a bachelor's billiard room. There was card-playing every evening at his house, if only at one table. But at frequent intervals all the society of our town, with the mammas and young ladies, assembled at his house to dance. Though Mikhail Makarovich was a widower, he did not live alone. His widowed daughter lived with him, with her 2 unmarried daughters, grown-up girls, who had finished their education. They were of agreeable appearance and lively character, and though everyone knew they would have no dowry, they attracted all the young men of fashion to their grandfather's house. Mikhail Makarovich was by no means very efficient in his work, though he performed his duties no worse than many others. To speak plainly, he was a man of rather narrow education. His understanding of the limits of his administrative power could not always be relied upon. It was not so much that he failed to grasp certain reforms enacted during the present reign, as that he made conspicuous blunders in his interpretation of them. This was not from any special lack of intelligence, but from carelessness, for he was always in too great a hurry to go into the subject. "I have the heart of a soldier rather than of a civilian," he used to say of himself. He had not even formed a definite idea of the fundamental principles of the reforms connected with the emancipation of the serfs, and only picked it up, so to speak, from year to year, involuntarily increasing his knowledge by practice. And yet he was himself a landowner. Pyotr Ilyitch knew for certain that he would meet some of Mikhail Makarovich's visitors there that evening, but he did not know which. As it happened, at that moment the prosecutor and Varinsky, our district doctor, a young man who had only just come to us from Petersburg after taking a brilliant degree at the Academy of Medicine, were playing whist at the police captain's. Ippolit Kiryovich, the prosecutor, was rather a peculiar man, of about 35, inclined to be consumptive, and married to a fat and childless woman. He was vain and irritable, though he had a good intellect, and even a kind heart. It seemed that all that was wrong with him was that he had a better opinion of himself than his ability warranted, and that made him seem constantly uneasy. He had, moreover, certain higher, even artistic leanings, towards psychology, for instance, a special study of the human heart, a special knowledge of the criminal and his crime. He cherished a grievance on this ground, considering that he had been passed over in the service, and being firmly persuaded that in higher spheres he had not been properly appreciated, and had enemies. In glooming moments he even threatened to give up his post and practice as a barrister in criminal cases. The unexpected Karamazov case agitated him profoundly. It was a case that might well be talked about all over Russia, but I am anticipating. Nikolai Parfenovich Niyudov, the young investigating lawyer, who had only come from Petersburg 2 months before, was sitting in the next room with the young ladies. People talked about it afterwards and wondered that all the gentlemen should, as though intentionally, on the evening of the crime, have been gathered together at the house of the executive authority, yet it was perfectly simple and happened quite naturally. Ippolit Kiryovich's wife had had toothache for the last 2 days, and he was obliged to go out to escape from her groans. The doctor, from the very nature of his being, could not spend an evening except at cards. Nikolai Pavlovich Niyudov had been intending for 3 days past to drop in that evening at Mikhail Makarovich's, so to speak casually, so as slyly to startle the eldest granddaughter, Olga Mikhailovna, by showing that he knew her secret, that he knew it was her birthday, and that she was trying to conceal it on purpose, so as not to be obliged to give a dance. He anticipated a great deal of merriment, many playful jests about her age, and her being afraid to reveal it, about his knowing her secret and telling everybody, and so on. The charming young man was a great adept at such teasing. The ladies had christened him the naughty man, and he seemed to be delighted at the name. He was extremely well-bred, however, of good family, education and feelings, and though leading a life of pleasure, his sallies were always innocent and in good taste. He was short and delicate-looking. On his white, slender little fingers he always wore a number of big glittering rings. When he was engaged in his official duties, he always became extraordinarily grave, as though realizing his position and the sanctity of the obligations laid upon him. He had a special gift for mystifying murderers and other criminals of the peasant class during interrogation, and if he did not win their respect, he certainly succeeded in arousing their wonder. Pyotr Ilyich was simply dumbfounded when he went into the police captain's. He saw instantly that everyone knew. They had positively thrown down their cards or were standing up and talking. Even Nikolai Ivanovich had left the young ladies and run in, looking strenuous and ready for action. Pyotr Ilyich was met with the astounding news that old Fyodor Pavlovich really had been murdered that evening in his own house, murdered and robbed. The news had only just reached them in the following manner. Marfa Ignatievna, the wife of old Grigory, who had been knocked senseless near the fence, was sleeping soundly in her bed and might well have slept till morning after the draught she had taken. But all of a sudden she waked up, no doubt roused by a fearful epileptic scream from Smerkov, who was lying in the next room unconscious. That scream always preceded his fits, and always terrified and upset Marfa Ignatievna. She could never get accustomed to it. She jumped up and ran half awake to Smerkov's room, but it was dark there, and she could only hear the invalid beginning to gasp and struggle. Then Marfa Ignatievna herself screamed out and was going to call her husband, but suddenly realized that when she had got up, he was not beside her in bed. She ran back to the bedstead and began groping with her hands, but the bed was really empty. Then he must have gone out. Where? She ran to the steps and timidly called him. She got no answer, of course, but she caught the sound of groans far away in the garden in the darkness. She listened. The groans were repeated, and it was evident they came from the garden. Good Lord, just as it was with Lizaveta Smirdyasha, she thought distractedly. She went timidly down the steps and saw that the gate into the garden was open. He must be out there, poor dear, she thought. She went up to the gate, and all at once she distinctly heard Grigory calling her by name. Marfa, Marfa, in a weak, moaning, dreadful voice. Lord, preserve us from harm, Marfa Ignatievna murmured, and ran towards the voice, and that was how she found Grigory. But she found him not by the fence where he had been knocked down, but about 20 paces off. It appeared later that he had crawled away on coming to himself, and probably had been a long time getting so far, losing consciousness several times. She noticed at once that he was covered with blood, and screamed at the top of her voice. Grigory was muttering incoherently. He has murdered. His father murdered. Why scream, silly? Run. Fetch someone. But Marfa continued screaming, and seeing that her master's window was open and that there was a candlelight in the window, she ran there and began calling Fyodor Pavlovich. But peeping in at the window, she saw a fearful sight. Her master was lying on his back, motionless on the floor. His light-colored dressing gown and white shirt were soaked with blood. The candle on the table brightly lighted up the blood and the motionless dead face of Fyodor Pavlovich, terror-stricken, Marfa rushed away from the window, ran out of the garden, drew the bolt of the big gate, and ran headlong by the back way to the neighbor, Maria Kondratyevna. Both mother and daughter were asleep, but they waked up at Marfa's desperate and persistent screaming and knocking at the shutter. Marfa, shrieking and screaming incoherently, managed to tell them the main fact and to beg for assistance. It happened that Foma had come back from his wanderings and was staying the night with them. They got him up immediately, and all three ran to the scene of the crime. On the way, Maria Kondratyevna remembered that at about 8 o'clock she heard a dreadful scream from their garden, and this was no doubt Grigory's scream. "Parricide!" uttered when he caught hold of Mitya's leg. Some one person screamed out and then was silent. Maria Kondratyevna explained as she ran. Running to the place where Grigory lay, the two women, with the help of Foma, carried him to the lodge. They lighted a candle and saw that Smerdyakov was no better, that he was writhing in convulsions, his eyes fixed in a squint, and that foam was flowing from his lips. They moistened Grigory's forehead with water mixed with vinegar, and the water revived him at once. He asked immediately, "Is the master murdered?" Then Foma and both the women ran to the house and saw this time that not only the window, but also the door into the garden was wide open, though Fyodor Pavlovich had for the last week locked himself in every night and did not allow even Grigory to come in on any pretext. Seeing that door open, they were afraid to go in to Fyodor Pavlovich for fear anything should happen afterwards. And when they returned to Grigory, the old man told them to go straight to the police captain. Maria Kondratyevna ran there and gave the alarm to the whole party at the police captain's. She arrived only 5 minutes before Pyotr Ilyich, so that his story came, not as his own surmise and theory, but as the direct confirmation, by a witness, of the theory held by all as to the identity of the criminal. It was resolved to act with energy. The deputy police inspector of the town was commissioned to take 4 witnesses, to enter Fyodor Pavlovich's house, and there to open an inquiry on the spot, according to the regular forms, which I will not go into here. The district doctor, a zealous man, new to his work, almost insisted on accompanying the police captain, the prosecutor, and the investigating lawyer. I will note briefly that Fyodor Pavlovich was found to be quite dead, with his skull battered in. But with what? Most likely with the same weapon with which Grigory had been attacked. And immediately that weapon was found, Grigory, to whom all possible medical assistance was at once given, described in a weak and breaking voice how he had been knocked down. They began looking with a lantern by the fence and found the brass pestle dropped in the most conspicuous place on a garden path. There were no signs of disturbance in the room where Fyodor Pavlovich was lying, but by the bed behind the screen, they picked up from the floor a big and thick envelope with the inscription, "A present of 3,000 roubles for my angel Grushenka, if she's willing to come." And below had been added by Fyodor Pavlovich, "For my little chicken." There were 3 seals of red sealing wax on the envelope, but it had been torn open and was empty. The money had been removed. They found also on the floor a piece of narrow pink ribbon with which the envelope had been tied up. One piece of Pyotr Ilyitch's evidence made a great impression on the prosecutor and the investigating magistrate, namely, his idea that Dmitri Fyodorovich would shoot himself before daybreak, that he had resolved to do so, had spoken of it to Ilyich, had taken the pistols, loaded them before him, written a letter, put it in his pocket, etc. When Pyotr Ilyich, though still unwilling to believe in it, threatened to tell someone so as to prevent the suicide, Mitya had answered grinning, "You'll be too late." So they must make haste to Mokrow to find the criminal before he really did shoot himself. That's clear," repeated the prosecutor in great excitement. "That's just the way with mad fellows like that. I shall kill myself tomorrow, so I'll make merry till I die." The story of how he had bought the wine and provisions excited the prosecutor more than ever. "Do you remember the fellow that murdered a merchant called Alsofiev, gentlemen? He stole 1,500, went at once to have his hair curled, and then, without even hiding the money, carrying it almost in his hand in the same way, he went off to the girls." All were delayed, however, by the inquiry, the search, and the formalities, etc., in the house of Fyodor Pavlovich. It all took time and so, 2 hours before starting. They set on ahead to Mokrow the officer of the rural police, Mavriky Mavrikyevich Shmetsov, who had arrived in the town the morning before to get his pay. He was instructed to avoid raising the alarm when he reached Mokrow, but to keep constant watch over the criminal till the arrival of the proper authorities, to procure also witnesses for the arrest, police constables, and so on. Mavrikyevich did as he was told, preserving his incognito and giving no one but his old acquaintance, Trifon Borisovich, the slightest hint of his secret business. He had spoken to him just before Mitya met the landlord in the balcony, looking for him in the dark, and noticed at once a change in Trifon Borisovich's face and voice. So neither Mitya nor anyone else knew that he was being watched. The box with the pistols had been carried off by Trifon Borisovich and put in a suitable place. Only after 4 o'clock, almost at sunrise, all the officials, the police captain, the prosecutor, the investigating lawyer, drove up in 2 carriages, each drawn by 3 horses. The doctor remained at Fyodor Pavlovich's to make a post-mortem next day on the body, but he was particularly interested in the condition of the servant, Smirnikov. Such violent and protracted epileptic fits, reoccurring continually for 24 hours, are rarely to be met with, and are of interest to science, he declared enthusiastically to his companions, and as they left they laughingly congratulated him on his find. The prosecutor and the investigating lawyer distinctly remembered the doctor saying that Smirnikov could not outlive the night. After these long, but I think necessary explanations, we will return to that moment of our tale at which we broke off. Chapter 3. The Sufferings of a Soul, the First Ordeal. And so Mitya sat looking wildly at the people round him, not understanding what was said to him. Suddenly he got up, flung up his hands, and shouted aloud, "I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty of that blood. I'm not guilty of my father's blood. I meant to kill him, but I'm not guilty. Not I." But he had hardly said this before Grushenka rushed from behind the curtain and flung herself at the police captain's feet. "It was my fault. My wickedness," she cried, in a heart-rending voice, bathed in tears, stretching out her clasped hands towards them. "He did it through me. I tortured him and drove him to it. I tortured the poor old man that's there too, in my wickedness, and brought him to this. It's my fault. Mine first, mine most. My fault." "Yes, it's your fault. You're the chief criminal. You fury, you harlot. You're the most to blame," shouted the police captain, threatening her with his hand. But he was quickly and resolutely suppressed. The prosecutor positively seized hold of him. "This is absolutely irregular, Mikhail Makarovich," he cried. "You are positively hindering the inquiry. You're ruining the case," he almost gasped. "Follow the regular course. Follow the regular course," cried Nikolai Perhotin, fearfully excited too. "Otherwise, it's absolutely impossible." "Judge us together," Grushenka cried frantically, still kneeling. "Punish us together. I will go with him now, if it's to death." "Gusha, my life, my blood, my holy one." Mitya fell on his knees beside her and held her tight in his arms. "Don't believe her," he cried. "She's not guilty of anything, of any blood, of anything." He remembered afterwards that he was forcibly dragged away from her by several men, and that she was let out, and that when he recovered himself he was sitting at a table. Beside him and behind him stood the man with metal plates. Facing him on the other side of the table sat Nikolai Perhotin, the investigating lawyer. He kept persuading him to drink a little water out of a glass that stood on a table. "That will refresh you. That will calm you. Be calm. Don't be frightened," he added, extremely politely. Mitya became suddenly intensely interested in his big rings, one with an amethyst and another with a transparent bright yellow stone, of great brilliance. And long afterwards he remembered with wonder how those rings had riveted his attention through all those terrible hours of interrogation, so that he was utterly unable to tear himself away from them and dismiss them as things that had nothing to do with his position. On Mitya's left side, in the place where Maximov had been sitting at the beginning of the evening, the prosecutor was now seated, and on Mitya's right hand, where Grushenka had been, was a rosy-cheeked young man in a sort of shabby hunting jacket, with ink and paper before him. This was the secretary of the investigating lawyer, who had brought him with him. The police captain was now standing by the window at the other end of the room, beside Kalganov, who was sitting there. "Drink some water," said the investigating lawyer softly, for the 10th time. "I have drunk it, gentlemen, I have. But, come, gentlemen, crush me, punish me, decide my fate," cried Mitya, staring with terribly fixed, wide-open eyes at the investigating lawyer. "So you positively declare that you are not guilty of the death of your father, Fyodor Pavlovich?" asked the investigating lawyer, softly but insistently. "I am not guilty. I am guilty of the blood of another old man, but not of my father's, and I weep for it. I killed the old man and knocked him down, but it's hard to have to answer for that murder with another, a terrible murder of which I am not guilty. It's a terrible accusation, gentlemen, a knockdown blow. But who has killed my father? Who has killed him? Who can have killed him if I didn't? It's marvelous, extraordinary, impossible." "Yes, who can have killed him?" the investigating lawyer was beginning, but Ippolit Kirillovich, the prosecutor, glancing at him, addressed Mitya. "You need not worry yourself about the old servant, Grigory Vassilievich. He is alive. He has recovered, and in spite of the terrible blows inflicted, according to his own and your evidence, by you, there seems no doubt that he will live, so the doctor says, at least." "Alive! He's alive!" cried Mitya, flinging up his hands. His face beamed. "Lord, I thank thee for the miracle thou hast wrought for me, a sinner and evildoer. That's an answer to my prayer. I've been praying all night." And he crossed himself 3 times. He was almost breathless. "So, from this Grigory, we have received such important evidence concerning you that—" the prosecutor would have continued, but Mitya suddenly jumped up from his chair. "1 minute, gentlemen. For God's sake, 1 minute. I will run to her." "Excuse me. At this moment it's quite impossible," Nikolai Perhotin almost shrieked. He, too, leapt to his feet. Mitya was seized by the man with the metal plates, but he sat down of his own accord. "Gentlemen, what a pity. I wanted to see her for 1 minute only. I wanted to tell her that it has been washed away. It has gone. That blood that was weighing on my heart all night, and that I am not a murderer now. Gentlemen, she is my betrothed," he said ecstatically and reverently, looking round at them all. "Oh, thank you, gentlemen. Oh, in 1 minute you have given me new life, new heart. That old man used to carry me in his arms, gentlemen. He used to wash me in the tub when I was a baby 3 years old, abandoned by everyone. He was like a father to me." "And so you," the investigating lawyer began. "Allow me, gentlemen. Allow me 1 minute more," interposed Mitya, putting his elbows on the table and covering his face with his hands. "Let me have a moment to think. Let me breathe, gentlemen. All this is horribly upsetting. Horribly. A man is not a drum, gentlemen." "Drink a little more water," murmured Nikolai Perhotin. Mitya took his hands from his face and laughed. His eyes were confident. He seemed completely transformed in a moment. His whole bearing was changed. He was once more the equal of these men, with all of whom he was acquainted, as though they had all met the day before, when nothing had happened, at some social gathering. We may note in passing that on his first arrival, Mitya had been made very welcome at the police captain's, but later, during the last month especially, Mitya had hardly called at all, and when the police captain met him, in the street for instance, Mitya noticed that he frowned and only bowed out of politeness. His acquaintance with the prosecutor was less intimate, though he sometimes paid his wife, a nervous and fanciful lady, visits of politeness, without quite knowing why. And she always received him graciously and had, for some reason, taken an interest in him up to the last. He had not had time to get to know the investigating lawyer, though he had met him and talked to him twice, each time about the fair sex. "You're a most skillful lawyer, I see, Nikolai Perhotin," cried Mitya, laughing gaily. "But I can help you now. Oh, gentlemen, I feel like a new man, and don't be offended at my addressing you so simply and directly. I am rather drunk too. I'll tell you that frankly. I believe I've had the honor and pleasure of meeting you, Nikolai Perhotin, at my kinsman Musov. Gentlemen, I don't pretend to be on equal terms with you. I understand, of course, in what character I'm sitting before you. Oh, of course, there's a horrible suspicion hanging over me, if Grigory has given evidence. A horrible suspicion. It's awful, awful. I understand it. But to business, gentlemen. I am ready, and we will make an end of it in 1 moment. For listen, gentlemen, since I know I am innocent, we can put an end to it in a minute. Can't we? Mitya spoke much and quickly, nervously and effusively, as though he positively took his listeners to be his best friends. "So, for the present, we will write that you absolutely deny the charge brought against you," said Nikolai Perhotin impressively, and bending down to the secretary, he dictated to him in an undertone what to write. Write it down. You want to write that down. Well, write it. I consent. I give my full consent, gentlemen. Only, do you see? Stay. Write this. Of disorderly conduct I am guilty. Of violence on the poor old man I am guilty. And there is something else at the bottom of my heart, of which I am guilty too. But that you need not write down. That's my personal life, gentlemen. That doesn't concern you. The bottom of my heart, that's to say. But of the murder of my old father I am not guilty. That's a wild idea. It's quite a wild idea. I'll prove you that, and you'll be convinced directly. You will laugh, gentlemen. You'll laugh yourselves at your suspicion. Be calm, Dmitri Fyodorovich, said the investigating lawyer, evidently trying to allay Mitya's excitement by his own composure. Before we go on with our inquiry, I should like, if you will consent to answer, to hear you confirm the statement that you disliked your father, Fyodor Pavlovich, that you were involved in continual disputes with him. Here, at least, a quarter of an hour ago, you exclaimed that you wanted to kill him. I didn't kill him, you said, but I wanted to kill him. Did I exclaim that? That may be so, gentlemen. Yes, unhappily, I did want to kill him. Many times I wanted to. Unhappily. You wanted to? Would you consent to explain what motives precisely led you to such a sentiment of hatred for your parent? What is there to explain, gentlemen? Mitya shrugged his shoulders sullenly, looking down. I have never concealed my feelings. All the town knows about it. Everyone knows in the tavern. Only lately I declared them in Father Zosima's cell, and the very same day, in the evening, I beat my father. I nearly killed him, and I swore I'd come again and kill him, before witnesses. Oh, 1,000 witnesses. I've been shouting it aloud for the last month. Anyone can tell you that. The fact stares you in the face. It speaks for itself. It cries aloud, but feelings, gentlemen, feelings are another matter. You see, gentlemen, Mitya frowned, it seems to me that about feelings you've no right to question me. I know that you're bound by your office. I quite understand that. But that's my affair, my private, intimate affair. Yet, since I haven't concealed my feelings in the past, in a tavern, for instance, I've talked to everyone, so I won't make a secret of it now. You see, I understand, gentlemen, that there are terrible facts against me in this business. I told everyone that I'd kill him, and now all of a sudden he's been killed. So it must have been me. I can make allowances for you, gentlemen. I can quite make allowances. I'm struck all of a heap myself, for who can have murdered him, if not I? That's what it comes to, isn't it? If not I, who can it be? Who? Gentlemen, I want to know. I insist on knowing. He exclaimed suddenly. Where was he murdered? How was he murdered? How and with what? Tell me, he asked quickly, looking at the two lawyers. We found him in his study, lying on his back on the floor with his head battered in, said the prosecutor. That's horrible, Mitya shuddered and, putting his elbows on the table, hid his face in his right hand. We will continue, interposed Nikolai Parfenovitch. So what was it that impelled you to this sentiment of hatred? You have asserted in public, I believe, that it was based upon jealousy. Well, yes, jealousy, and not only jealousy. Disputes about money? Yes, about money too. There was a dispute about 3,000 roubles, I think, which you claimed as part of your inheritance? 3,000. More, cried Mitya hotly. More than 6,000. More than 10, perhaps. I told everyone so, shouted it at them. But I made up my mind to let it go at 3,000. I was desperately in need of that 3,000, so the bundle of notes for 3,000 that I knew he kept under his pillow, ready for Grushenka, I considered as simply stolen from me. Yes, gentlemen, I looked upon it as mine, as my own property. The prosecutor looked significantly at the investigating lawyer and had time to wink at him on the sly. We will return to that subject later, said the lawyer promptly. You will allow us to note that point and write it down, that you looked upon that money as your own property. Write it down by all means. I know that's another fact that tells against me, but I'm not afraid of facts and I tell them against myself. Do you hear? Do you know, gentlemen? You take me for a different sort of man from what I am, he added, suddenly gloomy and dejected. You have to deal with a man of honor, a man of the highest honor. Above all, don't lose sight of it. A man who's done a lot of nasty things, but has always been, and still is, honorable at bottom, in his inner being. I don't know how to express it. That's just what's made me wretched all my life, that I yearned to be honorable, that I was, so to say, a martyr to his sense of honor. seeking for it with the lantern of Diogenes. And yet all my life I've been doing filthy things like all of us, gentlemen. That is like me alone. That was a mistake. Like me alone. Me alone. Gentlemen, my head aches. His brows contracted with pain. You see, gentlemen, I couldn't bear the look of him. There was something in him ignoble, impudent, trampling on everything sacred, something sneering and irreverent, loathsome. But now that he's dead, I feel differently. How do you mean? I don't feel differently, but I wish I hadn't hated him so. You feel penitent? No, not penitent. Don't write that. I'm not much good myself. I'm not very beautiful, so I had no right to consider him repulsive. That's what I mean. Write that down if you like. Saying this, Mitya became very mournful. He had grown more and more gloomy as the inquiry continued. At that moment, another unexpected scene followed. Though Grushenka had been removed, she had not been taken far away, only into the room next but one from the blue room, in which the examination was proceeding. It was a little room with one window, next beyond the large room in which they had danced and feasted so lavishly. She was sitting there with no one by her but Maximov, who was terribly depressed, terribly scared, and clung to her side as though for security. At their door stood one of the peasants with a metal plate on his breast. Grushenka was crying, and suddenly her grief was too much for her. She jumped up, flung up her arms, and, with a loud wail of sorrow, rushed out of the room to him, to her Mitya, and so unexpectedly that they had not time to stop her. Mitya, hearing her cry, trembled, jumped up, and with a yell rushed impetuously to meet her, not knowing what he was doing. But they were not allowed to come together, though they saw one another. He was seized by the arms. He struggled and tried to tear himself away. It took 3 or 4 men to hold him. She was seized too, and he saw her stretching out her arms to him, crying aloud as they carried her away. When the scene was over, he came to himself again, sitting in the same place as before, opposite the investigating lawyer, and crying out to them. What do you want with her? Why do you torment her? She's done nothing. Nothing. The lawyers tried to soothe him. About 10 minutes passed like this. At last Mikhail Makarovich, who had been absent, came hurriedly into the room and said in a loud and excited voice to the prosecutor, She's been removed. She's downstairs. Will you allow me to say one word to this unhappy man, gentlemen? In your presence, gentlemen. In your presence. By all means, Mikhail Makarovich, answered the investigating lawyer. In the present case, we have nothing against it. Listen, Dmitri Fyodorovich, my dear fellow, began the police captain, and there was a look of warm, almost fatherly feeling for the luckless prisoner on his excited face. I took your Agrafena Alexandrovna downstairs myself and confided her to the care of the landlord's daughters, and that old fellow Maximov is with her all the time. And I soothed her. Do you hear? I soothed and calmed her. I impressed on her that you have to clear yourself, so she mustn't hinder you, must not depress you, or you may lose your head and say the wrong thing in your evidence. In fact, I talked to her and she understood. She's a sensible girl, my boy, a good-hearted girl. She would have kissed my old hands, begging help for you. She sent me herself to tell you not to worry about her. And I must go, my dear fellow. I must go and tell her that you are calm and comforted about her. And so you must be calm. Do you understand? I was unfair to her. She's a Christian soul, gentlemen. Yes, I tell you. She's a gentle soul, and not to blame for anything. So what am I to tell her, Dmitri Fyodorovich? Will you sit quiet or not? The good-natured police captain said a great deal that was irregular, but Grushenka's suffering, a fellow creature's suffering, touched his good-natured heart, and tears stood in his eyes. Mitya jumped up and rushed towards him. Forgive me, gentlemen. Oh, allow me, he cried. You've the heart of an angel, Mikhail Makarovich. I thank you for her. I will be calm, cheerful, in fact. Tell her in the kindness of your heart that I am cheerful, quite cheerful, that I shall be laughing in a minute, knowing that she has a guardian angel like you. I shall have done with all this directly, and as soon as I'm free, I'll be with her. She'll see. Let her wait, gentlemen, he said, turning to the 2 lawyers. Now, I'll open my whole soul to you. I'll pour out everything. We'll finish this off directly, finish it off gaily. We shall laugh at it in the end, shan't we? But, gentlemen, that woman is the queen of my heart. Oh, let me tell you that. The one thing I'll tell you now. I see I'm with honorable men. She is my light. She is my holy one. And if only you knew. Did you hear her cry, I'll go to death with you? And what have I, a penniless beggar, done for her? Why such love for me? How can a clumsy, ugly brute like me, with my ugly face, deserve such love, that she's ready to go to exile with me? And how she fell down at your feet for my sake just now, and yet she's proud and has done nothing. How can I help adoring her? How can I help crying out and rushing to her as I did just now? Gentlemen, forgive me, but now I am comforted. And he sank back in his chair and, covering his face with his hands, burst into tears. But they were happy tears. He recovered himself instantly. The old police captain seemed much pleased, and the lawyers also. They felt that the examination was passing into a new phase. When the police captain went out, Mitya was positively gay. Now, gentlemen, I am at your disposal, entirely at your disposal. And if it were not for all these trivial details, we should understand one another in a minute. I'm at those details again. I'm at your disposal, gentlemen. But I declare that we must have mutual confidence, you in me and I in you, or there'll be no end to it. I speak in your interest. To business, gentlemen, to business. And don't rummage in my soul. Don't tease me with trifles, but only ask me about facts and what matters, and I will satisfy you at once, and damn the details. So spoke Mitya. The interrogation began again. Chapter 4. The Second Ordeal. You don't know how you encourage us, Dmitri Fyodorovich, by your readiness to answer, said Nikolai Parfenovich, with an animated air, and obvious satisfaction beaming in his very prominent, short-sighted, light grey eyes, from which he had removed his spectacles a moment before. And you have made a very just remark about the mutual confidence, without which it is sometimes positively impossible to get on in cases of such importance. If the suspected party really hopes and desires to defend himself and is in a position to do so, we, on our side, will do everything in our power, and you can see for yourself how we are conducting the case. You approve, Ippolit Kiryovich? He turned to the prosecutor. Oh, undoubtedly, replied the prosecutor. His tone was somewhat cold, compared with Nikolai Parfenovich's impulsiveness. I will note once for all that Nikolai Parfenovich, who had but lately arrived among us, had from the first felt marked respect for Ippolit Kiryovich, our prosecutor, and had become almost his bosom friend. He was almost the only person who put implicit faith in Ippolit Kiryovich's extraordinary talents as a psychologist and orator and in the justice of his grievance. He had heard of him in Petersburg. On the other hand, young Nikolai Parfenovich was the only person in the whole world whom our unappreciated prosecutor genuinely liked. On their way to Mokrow, they had time to come to an understanding about the present case. And now, as they sat at the table, the sharp-witted junior caught and interpreted every indication on his senior colleague's face, half a word, a glance, or a wink. Gentlemen, only let me tell my own story and don't interrupt me with trivial questions, and I'll tell you everything in a moment, said Mitya excitedly. Excellent, thank you. But before we proceed to listen to your communication, will you allow me to inquire as to another little fact of great interest to us? I mean the 10 roubles you borrowed yesterday at about 5 o'clock on the security of your pistols from your friend, Pyotr Ilyich Perhotin. I pledged them, gentlemen. I pledged them for 10 roubles. What more? That's all about it. As soon as I got back to town, I pledged them. You got back to town? Then you had been out of town. Yes, I went a journey of 40 versts into the country. Didn't you know? The prosecutor and Nikolai Parfenovich exchanged glances. Well, how would it be if you began your story with a systematic description of all you did yesterday, from the morning onwards? Allow us, for instance, to inquire why you were absent from the town, and just when you left and when you came back, all those facts. You should have asked me like that from the beginning, cried Mitya, laughing aloud. And, if you like, we won't begin from yesterday, but from the morning of the day before. Then you understand how, why, and where I went. I went the day before yesterday, gentlemen, to a merchant of the town called Samsonov, and borrowed 3,000 roubles from him on safe security. It was a pressing matter, gentlemen. It was a sudden necessity. Allow me to interrupt you, the prosecutor put in politely. Why were you in such pressing need for just that sum, 3,000? Oh, gentlemen, you needn't go into details. How, when, and why just so much money, and not so much, and all that rigmarole. Why, it will run to 3 volumes, and then you want an epilogue. Mitya said all this with the good-natured but impatient familiarity of a man who is anxious to tell the whole truth and is full of the best intentions. "Gentlemen," he corrected himself hurriedly, "don't be vexed with me for my restiveness. I beg you again. Believe me once more, I feel the greatest respect for you and understand the true position of affairs. Don't think I'm drunk. I'm quite sober now. And, besides, being drunk will be no hindrance. It's with me, you know, like the saying, when he is sober, he is a fool. When he is drunk, he is a wise man. But I see, gentlemen, it's not the proper thing to make jokes to you, till we've had our explanation, I mean. And I have my own dignity to keep up too. I quite understand the difference for the moment. I am, after all, in the position of a criminal, and so far from being on equal terms with you. And it's your business to watch me. I can't expect you to pat me on the head for what I did to Grigory, for one can't break old men's heads with impunity. I suppose you'll put me away for him for 6 months, or a year perhaps, in the House of Correction. I don't know what the punishment is, but it will be without loss of the rights of my rank, without loss of my rank, won't it? So you see, gentlemen, I understand the distinction between us. But you must see that you could puzzle God himself with such questions. How did you step? Where did you step? When did you step? And on what did you step? I shall get mixed up if you go on like this, and you will put it all down against me. And what would that lead to? To nothing. And even if it's nonsense I'm talking now, let me finish, and you, gentlemen, being men of honor and refinement, will forgive me. I'll finish by asking you, gentlemen, to drop that conventional method of questioning. I mean, beginning from some miserable trifle, how I got up, what I had for breakfast, how I spat and where I spat, and so distracting the attention of the criminal, suddenly stun him with an overwhelming question. Whom did you murder? Whom did you rob? That's your regulation method. That's where all your cunning comes in. You can put peasants off their guard like that, but not me. I know the tricks. I've been in the service too. You're not angry, gentlemen? You forgive my impertinence? He cried, looking at them with a good nature that was almost surprising. It's only Mitya Karamazov, you know, so you can overlook it. It would be inexcusable in a sensible man, but you can forgive it in Mitya. Nikolai Parfenovitch listened and laughed too. Though the prosecutor did not laugh, he kept his eyes fixed keenly on Mitya, as though anxious not to miss the least syllable, the slightest movement, the smallest twitch of any feature of his face. "That's how we have treated you from the beginning," said Nikolai Parfenovitch, still laughing. "We haven't tried to put you out by asking how you got up in the morning and what you had for breakfast. We began, indeed, with questions of the greatest importance." "I understand. I saw it and appreciated it. And I appreciate still more your present kindness to me, an unprecedented kindness worthy of your noble hearts. We three here are gentlemen, and let everything be on the footing of mutual confidence between educated, well-bred people who have the common bond of noble birth and honor. In any case, allow me to look upon you as my best friends at this moment of my life, at this moment where my honor is assailed. That's no offense to you, gentlemen, is it?" "On the contrary, you've expressed all that so well, Dmitri Fyodorovich," Nikolai Parfenovitch answered with dignified approbation. "And enough of those trivial questions, gentlemen, or those tricky questions," cried Mitya enthusiastically. "Or there's simply no knowing where we shall get to, is there?" "I will follow your sensible advice entirely," the prosecutor interposed, addressing Mitya. "I don't withdraw my question. However, it is now vitally important for us to know exactly why you needed that sum. I mean precisely 3,000. Why I needed it? Oh, for one thing and another. Well, it was to pay a debt. A debt to whom? That I absolutely refuse to answer, gentlemen, not because I couldn't, or because I shouldn't dare, or because it would be damaging, for it's all a paltry matter and absolutely trifling. But I won't, because it's a matter of principle. That's my private life, and I won't allow any intrusion into my private life. That's my principle. Your question has no bearing on the case, and whatever has nothing to do with the case is my private affair. I wanted to pay a debt. I wanted to pay a debt of honor, but to whom I won't say." "Allow me to make a note of that," said the prosecutor. "By all means, write down that I won't say, that I won't. Write that I should think it dishonorable to say. You can write it. You've nothing else to do with your time." "Allow me to caution you, sir, and to remind you once more, if you are unaware of it," the prosecutor began, with a peculiar and stern impressiveness, "that you have a perfect right not to answer the questions put to you now, and we on our side have no right to extort an answer from you, if you decline to give it for one reason or another. that is entirely a matter for your personal decision, but it is our duty, on the other hand, in such cases as the present, to explain and set before you the degree of injury you will be doing yourself by refusing to give this or that piece of evidence, after which I will beg you to continue. Gentlemen, I'm not angry. Mitya muttered in a rather disconcerted tone. Well, gentlemen, you see, that Samsonov to whom I went then. We will, of course, not reproduce his account of what is known to the reader already. Mitya was impatiently anxious not to omit the slightest detail. At the same time, he was in a hurry to get it over. But as he gave his evidence, it was written down, and therefore they had continually to pull him up. Mitya disliked this, but submitted. Got angry, though still good-humoredly. He did, it is true, exclaim from time to time, "Gentlemen, that's enough to make an angel out of patience," or "Gentlemen, it's no good your irritating me." But even though he exclaimed, he still preserved for a time his genially expansive mood. So he told them how Samsonov had made a fool of him 2 days before. The sale of his watch for 6 roubles to obtain money for the journey was something new to the lawyers. They were at once greatly interested, and even, to Mitya's intense indignation, thought it necessary to write the fact down as a secondary confirmation of the circumstance that he had hardly a farthing in his pocket at the time. Little by little Mitya began to grow surly. Then, after describing his journey to Siliagavi, the night spent in a stifling hut, and so on, he came to his return to the town. Here he began, without being particularly urged, to give a minute account of the agonies of jealousy he endured on Grushenka's account. He was heard with silent attention. They inquired particularly into the circumstance of his having a place of ambush in Maria Kondratievna's house at the back of Fyodor Pavlovich's garden to keep watch on Grushenka, and of Smerdakov's bringing him information. They laid particular stress on this, and noted it down. Of his jealousy he spoke warmly and at length, and though inwardly ashamed at exposing his most intimate feelings to public ignominy, so to speak, he evidently overcame his shame in order to tell the truth. The frigid severity with which the investigating lawyer, and still more the prosecutor, stared intently at him as he told his story, disconcerted him at last considerably. That boy, Nikolai Parfenovitch, to whom I was talking nonsense about women only a few days ago, and that sickly prosecutor are not worth my telling this to, he reflected mournfully. It's ignominious. But patient, humble, hold thy peace. He wound up his reflections with that line. But he pulled himself together to go on again. When he came to telling of his visits to Madame Hohlakov, he regained his spirits and even wished to tell a little anecdote of that lady which had nothing to do with the case. But the investigating lawyer stopped him, and civilly suggested that he should pass on to more essential matters. At last, when he described his despair and told them how, when he left Madame Hohlakov's, he thought that he'd get 3,000 if he had to murder someone to do it, they stopped him again and noted down that he had meant to murder someone. Mitya let them write it without protest. At last he reached a point in his story when he learned that Grushenka had deceived him and had returned from Samsonov's as soon as he left her there, though she had said that she would stay there till midnight. If I didn't kill Fenya then, gentlemen, it was only because I hadn't time, broke from him suddenly at that point in his story. That, too, was carefully written down. Mitya waited gloomily, and was beginning to tell how he ran into his father's garden when the investigating lawyer suddenly stopped him, and opening the big portfolio that lay on the sofa beside him, he brought out the brass pestle. "Do you recognize this object?" he asked, showing it to Mitya. "Oh, yes," he laughed gloomily. "Of course I recognize it. Let me have a look at it. Damn it, never mind." "You have forgotten to mention it," observed the investigating lawyer. "Hang it all, I shouldn't have concealed it from you. Do you suppose I could have managed without it? It simply escaped my memory." "Be so good as to tell us precisely how you came to arm yourself with it." "Certainly I will be so good, gentlemen." And Mitya described how he took the pestle and ran. "But what object had you in view in arming yourself with such a weapon?" "What object? No object. I just picked it up and ran off." "What for, if you had no object?" Mitya's wrath flared up. He looked intently at the boy and smiled gloomily and malignantly. He was feeling more and more ashamed at having told such people the story of his jealousy so sincerely and spontaneously. "Bother the pestle," broke from him suddenly. "But still." "Oh, to keep off dogs. Oh, because it was dark, in case anything turned up." "But have you ever on previous occasions taken a weapon with you when you went out, since you're afraid of the dark?" "Ugh, Damn it all, gentlemen, there's possibly no talking to you, cried Mitya, exasperated beyond endurance, and turning to the secretary, crimson with anger, he said quickly, with a note of fury in his voice, "Write down at once, that I snatched up the pestle to go and kill my father, Fyodor Pavlovich, by hitting him on the head with it. Well, now are you satisfied, gentlemen? Are your minds relieved?" he said, glaring defiantly at the lawyers. "We quite understand that you made the statement just now through exasperation with us and the questions we put to you, which you consider trivial, though they are, in fact, essential," the prosecutor remarked dryly in reply. "Well, upon my word, gentlemen, yes, I took the pestle. What does one pick things up for at such moments? I don't know what for. I snatched it up and ran, that's all. For to me, gentlemen, passons, or I declare I won't tell you any more." He sat with his elbows on the table and his head in his hand. He sat sideways to them and gazed at the wall, struggling against a feeling of nausea. He had, in fact, an awful inclination to get up and declare that he wouldn't say another word, not if you hang me for it. "You see, gentlemen," he said at last, with difficulty controlling himself, "you see, I listen to you and am haunted by a dream. It's a dream I have sometimes, you know. I often dream it. It's always the same, that someone is hunting me. Someone I'm awfully afraid of, that he's hunting me in the dark, in the night, tracking me. And I hide somewhere from him, behind a door or cupboard, hide in degrading way, and the worst of it is, he always knows where I am. But he pretends not to know where I am on purpose, to prolong my agony, to enjoy my terror. That's just what you're doing now. It's just like that." "Is that the sort of thing you dream about?" inquired the prosecutor. "Yes, it is. Don't you want to write it down?" said Mitya, with a distorted smile. No need to write it down, but still you do have curious dreams." "It's not a question of dreams now, gentlemen. This is realism. This is real life. I'm a wolf and you're the hunters. Well, hunt him down." "You are wrong to make such comparisons," began Nikolai Parfenovitch, with extraordinary softness. "No, I'm not wrong. Not at all." Mitya flared up again, though his outburst of wrath had obviously relieved his heart. He grew more good-humored at every word. "You may not trust a criminal or a man on trial tortured by questions, but an honorable man, the honorable impulses of the heart. No, that you must believe you have no right indeed, but be silent, heart. Be patient, humble, hold thy peace." "Well, shall I go on?" he broke off gloomily. "If you be so kind," answered Nikolai Parfenovitch. Chapter 5. A laceration in the drawing room. But in the drawing room, the conversation was already over. Katerina Ivanovna was greatly excited, though she looked resolute. At the moment Alyosha and Madame Hohlakov entered, Ivan Fyodorovitch stood up to take leave. His face was rather pale, and Alyosha looked at him anxiously. For this moment was to solve a doubt, a harassing enigma which had for some time haunted Alyosha. During the preceding month it had been several times suggested to him that his brother Ivan was in love with Katerina Ivanovna, and, what was more, that he meant to carry her off from Dmitri. Until quite lately the idea seemed to Alyosha monstrous, though it worried him extremely. He loved both his brothers, and dreaded such rivalry between them. Meantime, Dmitri had said outright on the previous day that he was glad that Ivan was his rival, and that it was a great assistance to him, Dmitri. In what way did it assist him? To marry Grushenka? But that Alyosha considered the worst thing possible. Besides all this, Alyosha had till the evening before implicitly believed that Katerina Ivanovna had a steadfast and passionate love for Dmitri. But he had only believed it till the evening before. He had fancied, too, that she was incapable of loving a man like Ivan, and that she did love Dmitri, and loved him just as he was, in spite of all the strangeness of such a passion. But during yesterday's scene with Grushenka another idea had struck him, the word lacerating, which Madame Hohlakov had just uttered, almost made him start, because half waking up towards daybreak that night he had cried out, "Laceration, laceration," probably applying it to his dream. He had been dreaming all night of the previous day's scene at Katerina Ivanovna's. Now Alyosha was impressed by Madame Hohlakov's blunt and persistent assertion that Katerina Ivanovna was in love with Ivan, and only deceived herself through some sort of pose, from self-laceration, and tortured herself by her pretended love for Dmitri from some fancied duty of gratitude. Yes, he thought, perhaps the whole truth lies in those words. But in that case, what was Ivan's position? Alyosha felt instinctively that a character like Katerina Ivanovna's must dominate, and she could only dominate someone like Dmitri, and never a man like Ivan. For Dmitri might at last submit to her domination to his own happiness, but Ivan, no. Ivan could not submit to her, and such submission would not give him happiness. Alyosha could not help believing that of Ivan. And now all these doubts and reflections flitted through his mind as he entered the drawing room. Another idea, too, forced itself upon him. What if she loved neither of them, neither Ivan nor Dmitri? It must be noted that Alyosha felt as it were ashamed of his own thoughts and blamed himself when they kept recurring to him during the last month. What do I know about love and women, and how can I decide such questions? He thought reproachfully, after such doubts and surmises. And yet it was impossible not to think about it. He felt instinctively that this rivalry was of immense importance in his brothers' lives, and that a great deal depended upon it. One reptile will devour the other, Ivan had pronounced the day before, speaking in anger of his father and Dmitri. So Ivan looked upon Dmitri as a reptile, and perhaps had long done so. Was it perhaps since he had known Katerina Ivanovna? That phrase had, of course, escaped Ivan unawares yesterday, but that only made it more important. If he felt like that, what chance was there of peace? Were there not, on the contrary, new grounds for hatred and hostility in their family? And with which of them was Alyosha to sympathize? And what was he to wish for each of them? He loved them both, but what could he desire for each in the midst of these conflicting interests? He might go quite astray in this maze, and Alyosha's heart could not endure uncertainty, because his love was always of an active character. He was incapable of passive love. If he loved anyone, he set to work at once to help him. And to do so, he must know what he was aiming at. He must know for certain what was best for each, and having ascertained this, it was natural for him to help them both. But instead of a definite aim, he found nothing but uncertainty and perplexity on all sides. It was lacerating, as was said just now. But what could he understand even in this laceration? He did not understand the first word in this perplexing maze. Seeing Alyosha, Katerina Ivanovna said quickly and joyfully to Ivan, who had already got up to go, "A minute! Stay another minute. I want to hear the opinion of this person here whom I trust absolutely. Don't go away," she added, addressing Madame Hohlakov. She made Alyosha sit down beside her, and Madame Hohlakov sat opposite, by Ivan. "You are all my friends here, all I have in the world, my dear friends," she began warmly, in a voice which quivered with genuine tears of suffering, and Alyosha's heart warmed to her at once. "You, Alexey Fyodorovich, were witness yesterday of that abominable scene, and saw what I did. You did not see it, Ivan Fyodorovich. He did. What he thought of me yesterday, I don't know. I only know one thing, that if it were repeated today, this minute, I should express the same feelings again as yesterday. The same feelings, the same words, the same actions. You remember my actions, Alexey Fyodorovich. You checked me in one of them. I must tell you that I can't get over it. Listen, Alexey Fyodorovich, I don't even know whether I still love him. I feel pity for him, and that is a poor sign of love. If I loved him, if I still loved him, perhaps I shouldn't be sorry for him now, but should hate him." Her voice quivered, and tears glittered on her eyelashes. Alyosha shuddered inwardly. That girl is truthful and sincere, he thought, and she does not love Dmitri any more. That's true, cried Madame Hohlakov. Wait, dear. I haven't told you the chief, the final decision I came to during the night. I feel that perhaps my decision is a terrible one, for me, but I foresee that nothing will induce me to change it. Nothing. It will be so all my life. My dear, kind, ever faithful and generous adviser, the one friend I have in the world, Ivan Fyodorovich, with his deep insight into the heart, approves and commends my decision. He knows it. Yes, I approve of it, Ivan assented, in a subdued but firm voice. But I should like Alyosha, too. I should like Alexey Fyodorovich, too, to tell me before my two friends whether I am right. I feel instinctively that you, Alyosha, my dear brother, she said again ecstatically, taking his cold hand in her hot one, I foresee that your decision, your approval, will bring me peace, in spite of all my sufferings, for, after your words, I shall be calm and submit. I feel that. I don't know what you are asking me, said Alyosha, flushing. I only know that I love you and at this moment wish for your happiness more than my own, but I know nothing about such affairs. Something impelled him to add hurriedly. In such affairs, Alexey Fyodorovich, in such affairs, the chief thing is honor and duty and something higher. I don't know what, but higher perhaps even than duty. I am conscious of this irresistible feeling in my heart, and it compels me irresistibly, but it may all be put into words. I've already decided, even if he marries that creature, she began solemnly, whom I never, never can forgive, even then I will not abandon him. Henceforth I will never, never abandon him, she cried, breaking into a sort of pale, hysterical ecstasy. Not that I would run after him continually, get in his way and worry him. Oh, no, I will go away to another town, where you like, but I will watch over him all my life. I will watch over him all my life unceasingly. When he becomes unhappy with that woman, and that is bound to happen quite soon, let him come to me, and he will find a friend, a sister. Only a sister, of course, and so forever. But he will learn at least that that sister is really his sister, who loves him and has sacrificed all her life to him. I will gain my point. I will insist on his knowing me and confiding entirely in me without reserve, she cried, in a sort of frenzy. I will be a god to whom he can pray, and that, at least, he owes me for his treachery and for what I suffered yesterday through him. And let him see that all my life I will be true to him and the promise I gave him, in spite of his being untrue and betraying me. I will become nothing but a means for his happiness, or, how should I say, an instrument, a machine for his happiness, and that for my whole life, and that he may see that all his life. That's my decision. Ivan Fyodorovich fully approves me. She was breathless. She had perhaps intended to express her idea with more dignity, art, and naturalness, but her speech was too hurried and crude. It was full of youthful impulsiveness. It betrayed that she was still smarting from yesterday's insult, and that her pride craved satisfaction. She felt this herself. Her face suddenly darkened, and an unpleasant look came into her eyes. Alyosha at once saw it and felt a pang of sympathy. His brother Ivan made it worse by adding, I've only expressed my own view, he said. From anyone else, this would have been affected and overstrained. But from you, no. Any other woman would have been wrong. But you're right. I don't know how to explain it. But I see that you are absolutely genuine, and therefore you are right. But that's only for the moment. And what does this moment stand for? Nothing but yesterday's insult. Madame Hohlakov obviously had not intended to interfere, but she could not refrain from this very just comment. Quite so, cried Ivan, with peculiar eagerness, obviously annoyed at being interrupted. In anyone else, this moment would be only due to yesterday's impression and would be only a moment. But with Katerina Ivanovna's character, that moment will last all her life. What for anyone else would be only a promise is for her an everlasting, burdensome, grim perhaps, but unflagging duty. And she will be sustained by the feeling of this duty being fulfilled. Your life, Katerina Ivanovna, will henceforth be spent in painful brooding over your own feelings, your own heroism, and your own suffering. But in the end that suffering will be softened and will pass into sweet contemplation of the fulfillment of a bold and proud design. Yes, proud it certainly is, and desperate in any case, but a triumph for you. And the consciousness of it will at last be a source of complete satisfaction and will make you resigned to everything else. This was unmistakably said with some malice and obviously with intention, even perhaps with no desire to conceal that he spoke ironically and with intention. Oh dear, how mistaken it all is, Madame Hohlakov cried again. Alexey Fyodorovich, you speak. I want dreadfully to know what you will say, cried Katerina Ivanovna, and burst into tears. Alyosha got up from the sofa. It's nothing, she went on through her tears. I'm upset. I didn't sleep last night. But by the side of two such friends as you and your brother, I still feel strong, for I know you too will never desert me. Unluckily, I am obliged to return to Moscow, perhaps tomorrow. and to leave you for a long time, and unluckily it's unavoidable, Ivan said suddenly. Tomorrow to Moscow? Her face was suddenly contorted. But, dear me, how fortunate, she cried in a voice suddenly changed. In one instant there was no trace left of her tears. She underwent an instantaneous transformation which amazed Alyosha. Instead of a poor, insulted girl weeping in a sort of laceration, he saw a woman completely self-possessed and even exceedingly pleased, as though something agreeable had just happened. Oh, not fortunate that I am losing you, of course not, she corrected herself suddenly, with a charming society smile. Such a friend as you are could not suppose that. I am only too unhappy at losing you. She rushed impulsively at Ivan, and seizing both his hands, pressed them warmly. But what is fortunate is that you will be able in Moscow to see Auntie and Agafya and to tell them all the horror of my present position. You can speak with complete openness to Agafya, but spare dear Auntie. You will know how to do that. You can't think how wretched I was yesterday and this morning, wondering how I could write them that dreadful letter, for one can never tell such things in a letter. Now it will be easy for me to write, for you will see them and explain everything. Oh, how glad I am! But I am only glad of that, believe me. Of course, no one can take your place. I will run at once to write the letter. She finished suddenly, and took a step as though to go out of the room. And what about Alyosha and his opinion, which you were so desperately anxious to hear? Cried Madame Hohlakov. There was a sarcastic, angry note in her voice. I had not forgotten that, cried Katerina Ivanovna, coming to a sudden standstill. And why are you so antagonistic at such a moment? She added, with warm and bitter reproachfulness. What I said, I repeat. I must have his opinion. More than that, I must have his decision. As he says, so it shall be. You see how anxious I am for your words, Alexey Fyodorovich, but what's the matter? I couldn't have believed it. I can't understand it, Alyosha cried suddenly in distress. What? What? He is going to Moscow, and you cry out that you are glad. You said that on purpose, and you begin explaining that you are not glad of that, but sorry to be losing a friend. But that was acting too. You were playing a part, as in a theatre. In a theatre? What? What do you mean? Exclaimed Katerina Ivanovna, profoundly astonished, flushing crimson and frowning. Though you assure him you are sorry to lose a friend in him, you persist in telling him to his face that it's fortunate he is going, said Alyosha breathlessly. He was standing at the table and did not sit down. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I don't understand myself. I seem to see in the flesh. I know I'm not saying it properly, but I'll say it all the same. Alyosha went on in the same shaking and broken voice. What I see is that perhaps you don't love Dmitri at all, and never have from the beginning. And Dmitri, too, has never loved you, and only esteems you. I really don't know how I dare to say all this, but somebody must tell the truth, for nobody here will tell the truth. What truth? Cried Katerina Ivanovna, and there was an hysterical ring in her voice. I will tell you, Alyosha went on with desperate haste, as though he were jumping from the top of a house. Call Dmitri. I will fetch him, and let him come here and take your hand and take Ivan's and join your hands. For you're torturing Ivan, simply because you love him, and torturing him because you love Dmitri through self-laceration, with an unreal love, because you've persuaded yourself. Alyosha broke off and was silent. You are a little religious idiot. That's what you are, Katerina Ivanovna snapped. Her face was white and her lips were moving with anger. Ivan suddenly laughed and got up. His hat was in his hand. You are mistaken, my good Alyosha, he said, with an expression Alyosha had never seen in his face before, an expression of youthful sincerity and strong, irresistibly frank feeling. Katerina Ivanovna has never cared for me. She has known all the time that I cared for her, though I never said a word of my love to her. She knew, but she didn't care for me. I've never been her friend either, not for one moment. She is too proud to need my friendship. She kept me at her side as a means of revenge. She revenged with me and on me all the insults which she has been continually receiving from Dmitri ever since their first meeting. For even that first meeting has rankled in her heart as an insult. That's what her heart is like. She has talked to me of nothing but her love for him. I'm going now. But believe me, Katerina Ivanovna, you really love him. And the more he insults you, the more you love him. That's your laceration. You love him just as he is. You love him for insulting you. If he reformed, you'd give him up at once and cease to love him. But you need him so as to contemplate continually your heroic fidelity and to reproach him for infidelity. And it all comes from your pride. Oh, there's a great deal of humiliation and self-abasement about it, but it all comes from pride. I'm too young and I've loved you too much. I know that I ought not to say this, that it would be more dignified on my part simply to leave you, and it would be less offensive for you. But I'm going far away, and shall never come back. It is forever. I don't want to sit beside a laceration, but I don't know how to speak now. I've said everything. Goodbye, Katerina Ivanovna. You can't be angry with me, for I am 100 times more severely punished than you, if only by the fact that I shall never see you again. Goodbye. I don't want your hand. You have tortured me too deliberately for me to be able to forgive you at this moment. I shall forgive you later, but now I don't want your hand. Den Dank, Dame. Begeer ik niet, he added, with a forced smile, showing, however, that he could read Schiller, and read him till he knew him by heart, which Alyosha would never have believed. He went out of the room without saying goodbye even to his hostess, Madame Hohlakov. Alyosha clasped his hands. Ivan, he cried desperately after him. Come back, Ivan. No, nothing will induce him to come back now, he cried again, regretfully realizing it. But it's my fault. I began it. Ivan spoke angrily, wrongly, unjustly and angrily. He must come back here. Come back! Alyosha kept exclaiming frantically. Katerina Ivanovna went suddenly into the next room. You have done no harm. You behaved beautifully, like an angel. Madame Hohlakov whispered rapidly and ecstatically to Alyosha. I will do my utmost to prevent Ivan Fyodorovich from going. Her face beamed with delight, to the great distress of Alyosha. But Katerina Ivanovna suddenly returned. She had 200-ruble notes in her hand. I have a great favor to ask of you, Alexey Fyodorovich, she began, addressing Alyosha with an apparently calm and even voice, as though nothing had happened. A week, yes, I think it was a week ago, Dmitri Fyodorovich was guilty of a hasty and unjust action, a very ugly action. There is a low tavern here, and in it he met that discharged officer, that captain, whom your father used to employ in some business. Dmitri Fyodorovich somehow lost his temper with this captain, seized him by the beard and dragged him out into the street and for some distance along it in that insulting fashion. And I'm told that his son, a boy, quite a child, who is at the school here, saw it and ran beside them crying and begging for his father, appealing to everyone to defend him, while everyone laughed. You must forgive me, Alexey Fyodorovich. I cannot think without indignation of that disgraceful action of his, one of those actions of which only Dmitri Fyodorovich would be capable in his anger and in his passions. I can't describe it even, I can't find my words. I've made inquiries about his victim, and find he is quite a poor man. His name is Snigiryov. He did something wrong in the army and was discharged. I can't tell you what, and now he has sunk into terrible destitution, with his family, an unhappy family of sick children, and, I believe, an insane wife. He has been living here a long time. He used to work as a copying clerk, but now he is getting nothing. I thought of you. That is, I thought. I don't know. I am so confused. You see, I wanted to ask you, my dear Alexey Fyodorovich, to go to him, to find some excuse to go to them. I mean, to that captain. Oh, goodness, how badly I explained it, and delicately, carefully, as only you know how to, manage to give him this assistance, these 200 roubles. He will be sure to take it. I mean, persuade him to take it. Or rather, what do I mean? You see, it's not by way of compensation to prevent him from taking proceedings, but simply a token of sympathy, of a desire to assist him from me, Dmitri Fyodorovich's betrothed, not from himself. But you know, I would go myself. But you know how to do it ever so much better. He lives in Lake Street, in the house of a woman called Kalmikov. For God's sake, Alexey Fyodorovich, do it for me. And now I'm rather tired. Goodbye. She turned and disappeared behind a portiere so quickly that Alyosha had not time to utter a word, though he wanted to speak. He longed to beg her pardon, to blame himself, to say something, for his heart was full and he could not bear to go out of the room without it. But Madame Hohlakov took him by the hand and drew him along with her. In the hall she stopped him again as before. She is proud. She is struggling with herself, but kind, charming, generous, she exclaimed in a half-whisper. Oh, how I love her, especially sometimes, and how glad I am again of everything. Dear Alexey Fyodorovich, you didn't know, but I must tell you that we all, both her aunts, I and all of us, Liz even, have been hoping and praying for nothing for the last month but that she may give up your favorite Dmitri, who takes no notice of her and does not care for her, and may marry Ivan Fyodorovich, such an excellent and cultivated young man, who loves her more than anything in the world. We are in a regular plot to bring it about, and I'm even staying on here, perhaps on that account. But she has been crying. She has been wounded again, cried Alyosha. Never trust a woman's tears, Alexey Fyodorovich. I am never for the women in such cases. I am always on the side of the men. Mamma, you are spoiling him, Liz's little voice cried from behind the door. No, it was all my fault. I am horribly to blame, Alyosha repeated unconsoled, hiding his face in his hands in an agony of remorse for his indiscretion. Quite the contrary. You behaved like an angel, like an angel. I'm ready to say so 1,000 times over. Mamma, how has he behaved like an angel? Liz's voice was heard again. I somehow fancied all at once, Alyosha went on as though he had not heard Liz, that she loved Ivan, and so I said that stupid thing. What will happen now? To whom? To whom? Cried Liz. Mamma, you really want to be the death of me? I ask you and you don't answer. At the moment, the maid ran in. Katerina Ivanovna is ill. She is crying, struggling, hysterics. What is the matter? Cried Liz, in a tone of real anxiety. Mamma, I shall be having hysterics, and not she. Liz, for mercy's sake, don't scream, don't persecute me. At your age, one can't know everything that grown-up people know. I'll come and tell you everything you ought to know. Oh, mercy on us. I'm coming. Hysterics is a good sign, Alexey Fyodorovich. It's an excellent thing that she is hysterical. That's just as it ought to be. In such cases, I am always against the woman, against all these feminine tears and hysterics. Run and say, Yulia, that I'll fly to her. As for Ivan Fyodorovich's going away like that, it's her own fault, but he won't go away. Liz, for mercy's sake, don't scream. Oh yes, you are not screaming. It's I am screaming. Forgive your mamma, but I am delighted. Did you notice, Alexey Fyodorovich, how young Ivan Fyodorovich was just now when he went out, when he said all that and went out? I thought he was so learned, such a savant, and all of a sudden he behaved so warmly, openly, and youthfully, with such youthful inexperience, and it was all so fine, like you. And the way he repeated that German verse, it was just like you. But I must fly. Alexey Fyodorovich, make haste to carry out her commission, and then make haste back. Liz, do you want anything now? For mercy's sake, don't keep Alexey Fyodorovich a minute. He will come back to you at once. Madame Hohlakov at last ran off. Before leaving, Alyosha would have opened the door to see Liz. On no account, cried Liz. On no account now. Speak through the door. How have you come to be an angel? That's the only thing I want to know. For an awful piece of stupidity. Liz, goodbye. Don't dare to go away like that, Liz was beginning. Liz, I have a real sorrow. I'll be back directly, but I have a great, great sorrow. And he ran out of the room. Chapter 6. A laceration in a cottage. He certainly was really grieved in a way he had seldom been before. He had rushed in like a fool, and meddled in what? In a love affair. But what do I know about it? What can I tell about such things? He repeated to himself for the 100th time, flushing crimson. Oh, being ashamed would be nothing. Shame is only the punishment I deserve. The trouble is, I shall certainly have caused more unhappiness, and Father Zossima sent me to reconcile and bring them together. Is this the way to bring them together? Then he suddenly remembered how he had tried to join their hands, and he felt fearfully ashamed again. Though I acted quite sincerely, I must be more sensible in the future, he concluded suddenly, and did not even smile at his conclusion. Katerina Ivanovna's commission took him to Lake Street, and his brother Dmitri lived close by, in a turning out of Lake Street. Alyosha decided to go to him in any case before going to the captain, though he had a presentiment that he would not find his brother. He suspected that he would intentionally keep out of his way now, but he must find him anyhow. Time was passing. The thought of his dying elder had not left Alyosha for 1 minute from the time he set off from the monastery. There was one point which interested him particularly about Katerina Ivanovna's commission, when she had mentioned the captain's son, the little schoolboy who had run beside his father crying. The idea had at once struck Alyosha that this must be the schoolboy who had bitten his finger when he, Alyosha, asked him what he had done to hurt him. Now Alyosha felt practically certain of this, though he could not have said why. Thinking of another subject was a relief, and he resolved to think no more about the mischief he had done, and not to torture himself with remorse, but to do what he had to do, let come what would. At that thought he was completely comforted. Turning to the street where Dmitri lodged, he felt hungry, and taking out of his pocket the roll he had brought from his father's, he ate it. It made him feel stronger. Dmitri was not at home. The people of the house, an old cabinet maker, his son, and his old wife, looked with positive suspicion at Alyosha. He hasn't slept here for the last 3 nights. Maybe he has gone away, the old man said in answer to Alyosha's persistent inquiries. Alyosha saw that he was answering in accordance with instructions. When he asked whether he were not at Grushenka's or in hiding at Foma's, all 3 looked at him in alarm. They are fond of him. They are doing their best for him, thought Alyosha. That's good. At last he found a house in Lake Street. It was a decrepit little house, sunk on one side, with 3 windows looking into the street, and with a muddy yard, in the middle of which stood a solitary cow. He crossed the yard and found a door opening into the passage. On the left of the passage lived the old woman of the house with her old daughter. Both seemed to be deaf. In answer to his repeated inquiry for the captain, one of them at last understood that he was asking for the lodgers, and pointed to a door across the passage. The captain's lodging turned out to be a simple cottage room. Alyosha had his hand on the iron latch to open the door, when he was struck by the strange hush within. Yet he knew from Katerina Ivanovna's words that the man had a family. Either they are all asleep, or perhaps they have heard me coming and are waiting for me to open the door. I'd better knock first. And he knocked. An answer came, but not at once, after an interval of perhaps 10 seconds. "Who's there?" shouted someone in a loud and very angry voice. Then Alyosha opened the door and crossed the threshold. He found himself in a regular peasant's room. Though it was large, it was cumbered up with domestic belongings of all sorts, and there were several people in it. On the left was a large Russian stove. From the stove to the window on the left was a stirring running across the room, and on it there were rags hanging. There was a bedstead against the wall on each side, right and left, covered with knitted quilts. On the one on the left was a pyramid of 4 print-covered pillows, each smaller than the one beneath. On the other there was only one very small pillow. The opposite corner was screened off by a curtain or a sheet hung on a string. Behind this curtain could be seen a bed made up on a bench and a chair. The rough square table of plain wood had been moved into the middle window. The 3 windows, which consisted each of 4 tiny greenish mildewy panes, it gave little light, and were close shut, so that the room was not very light and rather stuffy. On the table was a frying pan with the remains of some fried eggs, a half-eaten piece of bread, and a small bottle with a few drops of vodka. A woman of genteel appearance, wearing a cotton gown, was sitting on a chair by the bed on the left. Her face was thin and yellow, and her sunken cheeks betrayed at the first glance that she was ill. But what struck Alyosha most was the expression in the poor woman's eyes, a look of surprised inquiry and yet of haughty pride. And while he was talking to her husband, her big brown eyes moved from one speaker to the other with the same haughty and questioning expression. Beside her at the window stood a young girl, rather plain, with scanty reddish hair, poorly but very neatly dressed. She looked disdainfully at Alyosha as he came in. Beside the other bed was sitting another female figure. She was a very sad sight, a young girl of about 20, but hunchbacked and crippled with withered legs, as Alyosha was told afterwards. Her crutches stood in a corner close by. The strikingly beautiful and gentle eyes of this poor girl looked with mild serenity at Alyosha. A man of 45 was sitting at the table, finishing the fried eggs. He was spare, small, and weakly built. He had reddish hair and a scanty light-colored beard, very much like a wisp of tow. It was obviously this gentleman who had shouted to him, as there was no other man in the room. But when Alyosha went in, he leapt up from the bench on which he was sitting, and, hastily wiping his mouth with a ragged napkin, darted up to Alyosha. "It's a monk come to beg for the monastery. A nice place to come to," the girl standing in the left corner said aloud. The man spun round instantly towards her and answered her in an excited and breaking voice. "No, Varvara, you are wrong. Allow me to ask." He turned again to Alyosha. "What has brought you to our retreat?" Alyosha looked attentively at him. It was the first time he had seen him. There was something angular, flurried, and irritable about him. Though he had obviously just been drinking, he was not drunk. There was extraordinary impudence in his expression, and yet, strange to say, at the same time there was fear. He looked like a man who had long been kept in subjection and had submitted to it, and now had suddenly turned and was trying to assert himself. Or, better still, like a man who wants dreadfully to hit you, but is horribly afraid you will hit him. In his words and in the intonation of his shrill voice there was a sort of crazy humor, at times spiteful and at times cringing, and continually shifting from one tone to another. The question about our retreat he had asked, as it were quivering all over, rolling his eyes, and skipping up so close to Alyosha that he instinctively drew back a step. He was dressed in a very shabby dark cotton coat, patched and spotted. He wore checked trousers of an extremely light color, long out of fashion, and of very thin material. They were so crumpled and so short that he looked as though he had grown out of them like a boy. "I'm Alexei Karamazov," Alyosha began in reply. "I quite understand that, sir." The gentleman snapped out at once to assure him that he knew who he was already. "I am Captain Snegiryov, sir, but I am still desirous to know precisely what has led you—" "Oh, I've come for nothing special. I wanted to have a word with you, if only you allow me." "In that case, here is a chair, sir. Kindly be seated. That's what they used to say in the old comedies. Kindly be seated." And with a rapid gesture, he seized an empty chair and set it for him almost in the middle of the room. Then, taking another similar chair for himself, he sat down facing Alyosha, so close to him that their knees almost touched. "Nikolai Ilyich Snegiryov, sir, formerly a captain in the Russian infantry, put to shame for his vices, but still a captain. Though I might not be one now for the way I talk, for the last half of my life I've learned to say 'sir.' Is a word you use when you've come down in the world." "That's very true," smiled Alyosha. "But is it used involuntarily or on purpose?" "It's God's above. It's involuntary, and I usen't to use it. I didn't use the word 'sir' all my life, but as soon as I sank into low water I began to say 'sir.' It's the work of a higher power. I see you are interested in contemporary questions, but how can I have excited your curiosity, living as I do in surroundings impossible for the exercise of hospitality?" "I've come about that business." "About what business?" the captain interrupted impatiently. "About your meeting with my brother Dmitri Fyodorovich," Alyosha blurted out awkwardly. "What meeting, sir? You don't mean that meeting about my wisp of tow, then?" He moved closer so that his knees positively knocked against Alyosha. His lips were strangely compressed like a thread. "What wisp of tow?" muttered Alyosha. "He is come to complain of me, father," cried a voice familiar to Alyosha, the voice of the schoolboy, from behind the curtain. "I bit his finger just now." The curtain was pulled, and Alyosha saw his assailant lying on the little bed made up on the bench and a chair in a corner under the icons. The boy lay covered by his coat and an old wadded quilt. He was evidently unwell, and, judging by his glittering eyes, he was in a fever. He looked at Alyosha without fear, as though he felt he was at home and could not be touched. "What? Did he bite your finger?" The captain jumped up from his chair. "Was it your finger he bit?" "Yes. He was throwing stones with other schoolboys. There were 6 of them against him alone. I went up to him, and he threw a stone at me and then another at my head. I asked him what I had done to him, and then he rushed at me and bit my finger badly. I don't know why." "I'll thrash him, sir, at once, this minute." The captain jumped up from his seat. "But I'm not complaining at all. I'm simply telling you. I don't want him to be thrashed. Besides, he seemed to be ill." "And you suppose I'd thrash him? That I'd take my Ilyusha and thrash him before you for a satisfaction? Would you like it done at once, sir?" said the captain, suddenly turning to Alyosha, as though he were going to attack him. "I'm sorry about your finger, sir. But instead of thrashing Ilyusha, would you like me to chop off my 4 fingers with this knife here before your eyes to satisfy your just wrath? I should think 4 fingers would be enough to satisfy your thirst for vengeance. You wouldn't ask for the 5th one, too." He stopped short with a catch in his throat. Every feature in his face was twitching and working. He looked extremely defiant. He was in a sort of frenzy. "I think I understand it all now," said Alyosha gently and sorrowfully, still keeping his seat. So your boy is a good boy. He loves his father, and he attacked me as the brother of your assailant. Now I understand it, he repeated thoughtfully. But my brother Dmitri Fyodorovich regrets his action, I know that, and if only it is possible for him to come to you, or better still, to meet you in the same place, he will ask your forgiveness before everyone, if you wish it. After pulling out my beard, you mean, he will ask my forgiveness, and he thinks that will be a satisfactory finish, doesn't he? Oh no, on the contrary, he will do anything you like and in any way you like. So if I were to ask His Highness to go down on his knees before me in that very tavern, the Metropolis it's called, or in the marketplace, he would do it. Yes, he would even go down on his knees. You've pierced me to the heart, sir, touched me to tears and pierced me to the heart. I am only too sensible of your brother's generosity. Allow me to introduce my family, my 2 daughters and my son, my litter. If I die, who will care for them? And while I live, who but they will care for a wretch like me? That's a great thing the Lord has ordained for every man of my sort, sir, for there must be someone able to love even a man like me. Ah, that's perfectly true, exclaimed Alyosha. Oh, do leave off playing the fool. Some idiot comes in, and you put us to shame, cried the girl by the window, suddenly turning to her father with a disdainful and contemptuous air. Wait a little, Varvara, cried her father, speaking peremptorily but looking at her quite approvingly. That's her character, he said, addressing Alyosha again. And in all nature there was not that could find favor in his eyes, or rather in the feminine, that could find favor in her eyes. But now let me present you to my wife, Alina Petrovna. She is crippled, she is 43, she can move but very little. She is of humble origin. Alina Petrovna, compose your countenance. This is Alexey Fyodorovich Karamazov. Get up, Alexey Fyodorovich. He took him by the hand and with unexpected force pulled him up. You must stand up to be introduced to a lady. It's not the Karamazov, Mamma, who, etc., but his brother, radiant with modest virtues. Come, Alina Petrovna. Come, Mamma, first your hand to be kissed. And he kissed his wife's hand respectfully and even tenderly. The girl at the window turned her back indignantly on the scene. An expression of extraordinary cordiality came over the haughtily inquiring face of the woman. Good morning. Sit down, Mr. Karamazov, she said. Karamazov, Mamma, Karamazov. We are of humble origin, he whispered again. Well, Karamazov, or whatever it is, but I always think of Karamazov. Sit down. Why has he pulled you up? He calls me crippled, but I'm not. Only my legs are swollen like barrels, and I'm shriveled up myself. Once I used to be so fat, but now it's as though I had swallowed a needle. We are of humble origin, the captain muttered again. Oh, father, father, the hunchback girl, who had till then been silent on her chair, said suddenly, and she hid her eyes in her handkerchief. Buffoon, blurted out the girl at the window. Have you heard our news? Said the mother, pointing at her daughters. It's like clouds coming over. The clouds pass and we have music again. When we were with the army, we used to have many such guests. I don't mean to make any comparisons, everyone to their taste. The deacon's wife used to come then and say, Alexander Alexandrovich is a man of the noblest heart, but Nastasia Petrovna, she would say, is of the brood of hell. Well, I said, that's a matter of taste, but you are a little spitfire, and you want keeping in your place, says she. You black sword, said I, who asked you to teach me? But my breath, says she, is clean, and yours is unclean. You ask all the officers whether my breath is unclean, and ever since then I had it in my mind. Not long ago I was sitting here as I am now, when I saw that very general come in who came here for Easter, and I asked him, Your Excellency, said I, can a lady's breath be unpleasant? Yes, he answered, you ought to open the window pane or open the door, for the air is not fresh here. And they all go on like that. And what is my breath to them? The dead smell worse still. I won't spoil the air, said I. I'll order some slippers and go away. My darlings, don't blame your own mother. Nikolai Ilyich, how is it I can't please you? There's only Ilyusha who comes home from school and loves me. Yesterday he brought me an apple. Forgive your own mother. Forgive a poor lonely creature. Why has my breath become unpleasant to you? And the poor mad woman broke into sobs, and tears streamed down her cheeks. The captain rushed up to her. Mamma, Mamma, my dear, give over. You are not lonely. Everyone loves you. Everyone adores you. He began kissing both her hands again and tenderly stroking her face. Taking the dinner napkin, he began wiping away her tears. Alyosha fancied that he too had tears in his eyes. There, you see, you hear? He turned with a sort of fury to Alyosha, pointing to the poor imbecile. I see and hear, muttered Alyosha. Father, father, how can you? With him? Let him alone, cried the boy, sitting up in his bed and gazing at his father with glowing eyes. Do give over fooling, showing off your silly antics which never lead to anything, shouted Varvara, stamping her foot with passion. Your anger is quite just this time, Varvara, and I'll make haste to satisfy you. Come, put on your cap, Alexey Fyodorovich, and I'll put on mine. We will go out. I have a word to say to you in earnest, but not within these walls. This girl sitting here is my daughter Nina. I forgot to introduce her to you. She is a heavenly angel incarnate, who has flown down to us mortals, if you can understand. There he is shaking all over, as though he is in convulsions. Varvara went on indignantly. And she there, stamping her foot at me and calling me a fool just now. She is a heavenly angel incarnate too, and she has good reason to call me so. Come along, Alexey Fyodorovich, we must make an end. And snatching Alyosha's hand, he drew him out of the room into the street. Chapter 7. And in the open air. The air is fresh, but in my apartment it is not so in any sense of the word. Let us walk slowly, sir. I should be glad of your kind interest. I too have something important to say to you, observed Alyosha, only I don't know how to begin. To be sure, you must have business with me. You would never have looked in upon me without some object, unless you come simply to complain of the boy, and that's hardly likely. And, by the way, about the boy, I could not explain to you in there, but here I will describe that scene to you. My toe was thicker a week ago. I mean my beard. That's the nickname they give to my beard. The schoolboys most of all. Well, your brother Dmitri Fyodorovich was pulling me by my beard. I'd done nothing. He was in a towering rage and happened to come upon me. He dragged me out of the tavern into the marketplace. At that moment the boys were coming out of school, and with them Ilyusha. As soon as he saw me in such a state, he rushed up to me. Father, he cried, father. He caught hold of me, hugged me, tried to pull me away, crying to my assailant, let go, it's my father, forgive him. Yes, he actually cried, forgive him. He clutched at that hand, that very hand, in his little hands and kissed it. I remember his little face at that moment. I haven't forgotten it, and I never shall. I swear, cried Alyosha, that my brother will express his most deep and sincere regret, even if he has to go down on his knees in that same marketplace. I'll make him, or he is no brother of mine. Aha, then it's only a suggestion, and it does not come from him, but simply from the generosity of your own warm heart. You should have said so. No, in that case, allow me to tell you of your brother's highly chivalrous soldierly generosity, for he did give expression to it at the time. He left off dragging me by my beard and released me. You are an officer, he said, and I am an officer. If you can find a decent man to be your second, send me your challenge. I will give satisfaction, though you are a scoundrel. That's what he said. A chivalrous spirit indeed. I retired with Ilyusha, and that scene is a family record imprinted forever on Ilyusha's soul. No, it's not for us to claim the privileges of noblemen. Judge for yourself. You've just been in our mansion. What did you see there? 3 ladies, one a cripple and weak-minded, another a cripple and hunchback, and a third not crippled but far too clever. She's a student, dying to get back to Petersburg, to work for the emancipation of the Russian woman on the banks of the Neva. I won't speak of Ilyusha. He is only 9. I'm alone in the world, and if I die, what will become of all of them? I simply ask you that. And if I challenge him and he kills me on the spot, what then? What will become of them? And worse still, if he doesn't kill me but only cripples me. I couldn't work, but I should still be a mouth to feed. Who would feed it, and who would feed them all? Must I take Ilyusha from school and send him to beg in the streets? That's what it means for me to challenge him to a duel. It's silly talk and nothing else. He will beg your forgiveness. He will bow down at your feet in the middle of the marketplace, cried Alyosha again, with glowing eyes. I did think of prosecuting him, the captain went on, but look in our code. Could I get much compensation for a personal injury? And then Agravyevna Alexandrovna sent for me and shouted at me. Don't dare to dream of it. If you proceed against him, I'll publish it to all the world that he beat you for your dishonesty, and then you will be prosecuted. I call God to witness whose was the dishonesty and by whose commands I acted. Wasn't it by her own and Fyodor Pavlovich's? And what's more, she went on, I'll dismiss you for good, and you'll never earn another penny from me. I'll speak to my merchant too, and he'll dismiss you. And if he dismisses me, what can I earn then from anyone? Those two are all I have to look to. For your Fyodor Pavlovich has not only given over employing me for another reason, but he means to make use of papers I've signed to go to law against me. And so I kept quiet, and you have seen our retreat. But now let me ask you, did Ilyusha hurt your finger much? I didn't like to go into it in our mention before him. Yes, very much, and he was in a great fury. He was avenging you on me as a Karamazov. I see that now. But if only you had seen how he was throwing stones at his schoolfellows. It's very dangerous. They might kill him. They are children and stupid. A stone may be thrown and break somebody's head. That's just what has happened. He has been bruised by a stone today. Not on the head, but on the chest, just above the heart. He came home crying and groaning, and now he's ill. And you know he attacks them first. He is bitter against them on your account. They say he stabbed a boy called Perkhotin with a penknife not long ago. I've heard about that too. It's dangerous. Perkhotin is an official here. We may hear more about it. I would advise you, Alyosha went on warmly, not to send him to school at all for a time till he is calmer, and his anger is past. Anger, the captain repeated. That's just what it is. He is a little creature, but it's a mighty anger. You don't know all, sir. Let me tell you more. Since that instant, all the boys have been teasing him about the wisp of tow. Schoolboys are a merciless race. Individually, they are angels, but together, especially in schools, they are often merciless. Their teasing has stirred up a gallant spirit in Ilyusha. An ordinary boy, a weak son, would have submitted, have felt ashamed of his father, sir, but he stood up for his father against them all, for his father and for truth and justice. For what he suffered when he kissed your brother's hand and cried to him, Forgive, father, forgive him, that only God knows, and I, his father. For our children, not your children, but ours, the children of the poor gentleman looked down upon by everyone, know what justice means, sir, even at 9 years old. How should the rich know? They don't explore such depths once in their lives. But at that moment in the square when he kissed his hand, at that moment my Ilyusha had grasped all that justice means. That truth entered into him and crushed him forever, sir. The captain said hotly again with a sort of frenzy, and he struck his right fist against his left palm as though he wanted to show how the truth crushed Ilyusha. That very day, sir, he fell ill with fever and was delirious all night. All that day he hardly said a word to me, but I noticed he kept watching me from the corner, though he turned to the window and pretended to be learning his lessons. But I could see his mind was not on his lessons. Next day I got drunk to forget my troubles, sinful man as I am, and I don't remember much. Mamma began crying too. I am very fond of Mamma. Well, I spent my last penny drowning my troubles. Don't despise me for that, sir. In Russia, men who drink are the best. The best men among us are the greatest drunkards. I lay down, and I don't remember about Ilyusha, though all that day the boys had been jeering at him at school. Wisp of tow, they shouted. Your father was pulled out of the tavern by his wisp of tow. You ran by and begged forgiveness. On the third day, when he came back from school, I saw he looked pale and wretched. What is it? I asked. He wouldn't answer. Well, there's no talking in our mention without Mamma and the girls taking part in it. What's more, the girls had heard about it the very first day. Varvara had begun snarling. You fools and buffoons, can you ever do anything rational? Quite so, I said. Can we ever do anything rational? For the first time I turned it off like that. So in the evening I took the boy out for a walk, for you must know we go for a walk every evening, always the same way, along which we are going now. From our gate to that great stone which lies alone in the road under the hurdle, which marks the beginning of the town pasture. A beautiful and lonely spot, sir. Ilyusha and I walked along hand in hand as usual. He has a little hand, his fingers are thin and cold. He suffers with his chest, you know. Father, said he, father. Well, said I. I saw his eyes flashing. Father, how he treated you then. It can't be helped, Ilyusha, I said. Don't forgive him, father. Don't forgive him. At school they say that he has paid you 10 roubles for it. No, Ilyusha, said I would not take money from him for anything. Then he began trembling all over, took my hand in both his and kissed it again. Father, he said, Father, challenge him to a duel. At school they say you are a coward and won't challenge him, and that you'll accept 10 roubles from him. I can't challenge him to a duel, Ilyusha, I answered, and I told bravely what I've just told you. He listened. Father, he said, anyway, don't forgive it. When I grow up, I'll call him out myself and kill him. His eyes shone and glowed, and of course I am his father, and I had to put in a word. It's a sin to kill, I said, even in a duel. Father, he said, when I grow up, I'll knock him down, knock the sword out of his hand. I'll fall on him, wave my sword over him and say, I could kill you, but I forgive you. So there. You see what the workings of his little mind have been during these 2 days. He must have been planning that vengeance all day and raving about it at night. But he began to come home from school badly beaten. I found out about it the day before yesterday, and you are right. I won't send him to that school anymore. I heard that he was standing up against all the class alone and defying them all, that his heart was full of resentment, of bitterness. I was alarmed about him. We went for another walk. Father, he asked, are the rich people stronger than anyone else on earth? Yes, Ilyusha, I said. There are no people on earth stronger than the rich. Father, he said, I'll get rich. I'll become an officer and conquer everybody. The Tsar will reward me. I will come back here and then no one will dare. Then he was silent and his lips still kept trembling. Father, he said, what a horrid town this is. Yes, Ilyusha, I said, it isn't a very nice town. Father, let us move into another town, a nice one, he said, where people don't know about us. We will move, Ilyusha, said I, only I must save up for it. I was glad to be able to turn his mind from painful thoughts, and we began to dream of how we would move to another town, how we would buy a horse and cart. We will put Mama and your sisters inside. We will cover them up and we'll walk. You shall have a lift now and then, and I'll walk beside, for we must take care of our horse. We can't all ride. That's how we'll go. He was enchanted at that, most of all at the thought of having a horse and driving him, for of course a Russian boy is born among horses. We chatted a long while. Thank God, I thought, I have diverted his mind and comforted him. That was the day before yesterday, in the evening, but last night everything was changed. He had gone to school in the morning. He came back depressed, terribly depressed. In the evening, I took him by the hand and we went for a walk. He would not talk. There was a wind blowing and no sun, and a feeling of autumn. Twilight was coming on. We walked along, both of us depressed. Well, my boy, said I, how about our setting off on our travels? I thought I might bring him back to our talk of the day before. He didn't answer, but I felt his fingers trembling in my hand. Ah, I thought, it's a bad job. There's something fresh. We had reached the stone where we are now. I sat down on the stone, and in the air there were lots of kites flapping and whirling. There were as many as 30 in sight. Of course, it's just the season for the kites. Look, Ilyusha, said I, it's time we got out our last year's kite again. I'll mend it. Where have you put it away? My boy made no answer. He looked away and turned sideways to me. And then a gust of wind blew up the sand. He suddenly fell on me, threw both his little arms round my neck and held me tight. You know, when children are silent and proud and try to keep back their tears when they are in great trouble and suddenly break down, their tears fall in streams. With those warm streams of tears, he suddenly wetted my face. He sobbed and shook as though he were in convulsions, and squeezed up against me as I sat on the stone. Father, he kept crying, dear father, how he insulted you. And I sobbed too. We sat shaking in each other's arms. Ilyusha, I said to him, Ilyusha, darling, no one saw us then. God alone saw us. I hope he will record it to my credit. You must thank your brother, Alexei Fyodorovich. No, sir, I won't thrash my boy for your satisfaction. He had gone back to his original tone of resentful buffoonery. Alyosha felt, though, that he trusted him, and that if there had been someone else in Alyosha's place, the man would not have spoken so openly and would not have told what he had just told. This encouraged Alyosha, whose heart was trembling on the verge of tears. Ah, how I would like to make friends with your boy, he cried, if you could arrange it. Certainly, sir, muttered the captain. But now listen to something quite different. Alyosha went on. I have a message for you. That same brother of mine, Dmitri, has insulted his betrothed, too, a noble-hearted girl of whom you have probably heard. I have a right to tell you of her wrong. I ought to do so, In fact, for hearing of the insult done to you and learning all about your unfortunate position, she commissioned me at once, just now, to bring you this help from her, but only from her alone, not from Dmitri, who has abandoned her, nor from me, his brother, nor from anyone else, but from her, only from her. She entreats you to accept her help. She have both been insulted by the same man. She thought of you only when she had just received a similar insult from him. Similar in its cruelty, I mean. She comes like a sister to help a brother in misfortune. She told me to persuade you to take these 200 roubles from her, as from a sister, knowing that you are in such need. No one will know of it. It can give rise to no unjust slander. There are the 200 roubles. And I swear you must take them unless all men are to be enemies on earth. But there are brothers even on earth. You have a generous heart. You must see that. You must. And Alyosha held out 2 new rainbow-colored 100-ruble notes. They were both standing at the time by the great stone close to the fence, and there was no one near. The notes seemed to produce a tremendous impression on the captain. He started, but at first only from astonishment. Such an outcome of their conversation was the last thing he expected. Nothing could have been farther from his dreams than help from anyone, and such a sum. He took the notes, and for a minute he was almost unable to answer. Quite a new expression came into his face. That for me? So much money? 200 roubles? Good heavens! Why, I haven't seen so much money for the last 4 years. Mercy on us! And she says she is a sister. And is that the truth? I swear that all I told you is the truth, cried Alyosha. The captain flushed red. Listen, my dear, listen. If I take it, I shan't be behaving like a scoundrel. In your eyes, Alexey Fyodorovich, I shan't be a scoundrel. No, Alexey Fyodorovich, listen. He hurried, touching Alyosha with both his hands. You are persuading me to take it, saying that it's a sister sends it. But inwardly, in your heart, won't you feel contempt for me if I take it, eh? No, on my salvation I swear I shan't, and no one will ever know but me. I, you, and she, and one other lady, her great friend. Never mind the lady. Listen, Alexey Fyodorovich, at a moment like this you must listen, for you can't understand what these 200 roubles mean to me now. The poor fellow went on rising gradually into a sort of incoherent, almost wild enthusiasm. He was thrown off his balance and talked extremely fast, as though afraid he would not be allowed to say all he had to say. Besides its being honestly acquired from a sister, so highly respected and revered, do you know that now I can look after Mamma and Nina, my hunchback angel daughter? Dr. Hezonstu came to me in the kindness of his heart and was examining them both for a whole hour. I can make nothing of it, said he, but he prescribed a mineral water which is kept at a chemist here. He said it would be sure to do her good, and he ordered baths too, with some medicine in them. The mineral water costs 30 kopecks, and she'd need to drink 40 bottles perhaps. So I took the prescription and laid it on a shelf under the icons, and there it lies. And he ordered hot baths for Nina with something dissolved in them, morning and evening. But how can we carry out such a cure in our mansion, without servants, without help, without a bath, and without water? Nina is rheumatic all over. I don't think I told you that. All her right side aches at night. She is in agony. And, would you believe it, the angel bears it without groaning for fear of waking us. We eat what we can get, and she'll only take the leavings, what you'd scarcely give to a dog. I'm not worth it. I'm taking it from you. I am a burden on you. That's what her angel eyes try to express. We wait on her, but she doesn't like it. I am a useless cripple, no good to anyone, as though she were not worth it, when she is the saving of all of us with her angelic sweetness. Without her gentle word, it would be hell among us. She softens even Varvara. And don't judge Varvara harshly either. She is an angel too. She too has suffered wrong. She came to us for the summer, and she brought 16 roubles she had earned by lessons and saved up to go back with to Petersburg in September. That is now. But we took her money and lived on it. So now she has nothing to go back with. Though indeed she couldn't go back, for she has to work for us like a slave. She's like an overdriven horse with all of us on her back. She waits on us all, mends and washes, sweeps the floor, puts Mamma to bed. And Mamma is capricious and tearful and insane. And now I can get a servant with this money. You understand, Alexey Fyodorovich. I can get medicines for the dear creatures. I can send my student to Petersburg. I can buy beef. I can feed them properly. Good Lord, but it's a dream. Alyosha was delighted that he had brought him such happiness, and that the poor fellow had consented to be made happy. Stay, Alexey Fyodorovich, stay. The captain began to talk with fancied rapidity, carried away by a new daydream. Do you know that Yusha and I will perhaps really carry out our dream? We will buy a horse and cart, a black horse. He insists on its being black, and we will set off as we pretended the other day. I have an old friend, a lawyer in K province, and I heard through a trustworthy man that if I were to go, he'd give me a place as clerk in his office. So, who knows, maybe he would. So I'd just put Mama and Nina in the cart, and Yusha could drive, and I'd walk. Why, if I only succeed in getting one debt paid that's owing me, I should have perhaps enough for that too. There would be enough, cried Alyosha. Katerina Ivanovna will send you as much more as you need. And you know, I have money too. Take what you want, as you would from a brother, from a friend. You can give it back later. And you know you couldn't have a better idea than to move to another province. It would be the saving of you, especially of your boy. And you ought to go quickly, before the winter, before the cold. You must write to us when you are there, and we will always be brothers. No, it's not a dream. Alyosha could have hugged him. He was so pleased. But glancing at him, he stopped short. The man was standing with his neck outstretched and his lips protruding, with a pale and frenzied face. His lips were moving as though trying to articulate something. No sound came, but still his lips moved. It was uncanny. What is it? Asked Alyosha, startled. Alexey Fyodorovich. You, muttered the captain, faltering, looking at him with a strange, wild, fixed stare, and an air of desperate resolution. At the same time there was a sort of grin on his lips. You, sir. Wouldn't you like me to show you a little trick I know? He murmured, suddenly, in a firm, rapid whisper, his voice no longer faltering. What trick? A pretty trick, whispered the captain. His mouth was twisted on the left side. His left eye was screwed up. He still stared at Alyosha. What is the matter? What trick? Alyosha cried, now thoroughly alarmed. Why, look, squealed the captain suddenly, and showing him the two notes which he had been holding by one corner between his thumb and forefinger during the conversation, he crumpled them up savagely and squeezed them tight in his right hand. Do you see? Do you see? He shrieked, pale and infuriated, and suddenly flinging up his hand, he threw the crumpled notes on the sand. Do you see? He shrieked again, pointing to them. Look there! And with wild fury he began trampling them under his heel, gasping and exclaiming as he did so. So much for your money! 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 Suddenly he darted back and drew himself up before Alyosha, and his whole figure expressed unutterable pride. Tell those who send you that the wisp of tow does not sell his honor, he cried, raising his arm in the air. Then he turned quickly and began to run. But he had not run 5 steps before he turned completely round and kissed his hand to Alyosha. He ran another 5 paces and then turned round for the last time. This time his face was not contorted with laughter, but quivering all over with tears. In a tearful, faltering, sobbing voice he cried, What should I say to my boy if I took money from you for our shame? And then he ran on without turning. Alyosha looked after him, inexpressibly grieved. Oh, he saw that till the very last moment the man had not known he would crumple up and fling away the notes. He did not turn back. Alyosha knew he would not. He would not follow him and call him back. He knew why. When he was out of sight, Alyosha picked up the 2 notes. They were very much crushed and crumpled, and had been pressed into the sand, but were uninjured and even rustled like new ones when Alyosha unfolded them and smoothed them out. After smoothing them out, he folded them up, put them in his pocket, and went to Katerina Ivanovna to report on the success of her commission. Chapter 8. The Evidence of the Witnesses. The Babe. The examination of the witnesses began, but we will not continue our story in such detail as before, and so we will not dwell on how Nikolai Petronovich impressed on every witness called that he must give his evidence in accordance with truth and conscience, and that he would afterwards have to repeat his evidence on oath, how every witness was called upon to sign the protocol of his evidence, and so on. We will only note that the point principally insisted upon in the examination was the question of the 3,000 roubles, that is, was the sum spent here, at Mokrow, by Mitya on the first occasion, a month before, 3,000 or 1,500, and again had he spent 3,000 or 1,500 yesterday. Alas, all the evidence given by everyone turned out to be against Mitya. There was not one in his favor, and some witnesses introduced new, almost crushing facts in contradiction of his, Mitya's story. The first witness examined was Trifon Borisovich. He was not in the least abashed as he stood before the lawyers. He had, on the contrary, an air of stern and severe indignation with the accused, which gave him an appearance of truthfulness and personal dignity. He spoke little, and with reserve, waited to be questioned, answered precisely and deliberately. Firmly and unhesitatingly, he bore witness that the sum spent a month before could not have been less than 3,000, that all the peasants about here would testify that they had heard the sum of 3,000 mentioned by Dmitri Fyodorovich himself. What a lot of money he flung away on the gypsy girls alone. He wasted 1,000, I dare say, on them alone. I don't believe I gave them 500, was Mitya's gloomy comment on this. It's a pity I didn't count the money at the time, but I was drunk. Mitya was sitting sideways with his back to the curtains. He listened gloomily, with a melancholy and exhausted air, as though he would say, "Oh, say what you like. It makes no difference now." "More than 1,000 went on them, Dmitri Fyodorovich," retorted Trifon Borisovich firmly. "You flung it about at random and they picked it up. They were a rascally, thievish lot. Horse stealers. They've been driven away from here, or maybe they bear witness themselves how much they got from you. I saw the sum in your hands myself. Counted I didn't. You didn't let me. That's true enough. But by the look of it, I should say it was far more than 1,500. 1,500 indeed. We've seen money too. We can judge of amounts." As for the sum spent yesterday, he asserted that Dmitri Fyodorovich had told him, as soon as he arrived, that he had brought 3,000 with him. "Come now, is that so, Trifon Borisovich?" replied Mitya. "Surely I didn't declare so positively that I brought 3,000. "You did say so, Dmitri Fyodorovich. You said it before Andrei. Andrei himself is still here. Send for him. And in the hall, when you were treating the chorus, you shouted straight out that you would leave your 6,000 here. That is with what you spent before, we must understand." Stepan and Simeon heard it, and Pyotr Fomitch Kalganov, too, was standing beside you at the time. Maybe he'd remember it. The evidence as to the 6,000 made an extraordinary impression on the two lawyers. They were delighted with this new mode of reckoning. 3 and 3 made 6. 3,000 then, and 3 now made 6. That was clear. They questioned all the peasants suggested by Trifon Borisovich, Stepan and Simeon, the driver Andrei, and Kalganov. The peasants and the driver unhesitatingly confirmed Trifon Borisovich's evidence. They noted down, with particular care, Andrei's account of the conversation he had had with Mitya on the road. "Where," says he, "am I, Dmitri Fyodorovich, going, to heaven or to hell, and should I be forgiven in the next world or not?" The psychological Ippolit Kiryovich heard this with a subtle smile, and ended by recommending that these remarks as to where Dmitri Fyodorovich would go should be included in the case. Kalganov, when called, came in reluctantly, frowning and ill-humored, and he spoke to the lawyers as though he had never met them before in his life, though they were acquaintances whom he had been meeting every day for a long time past. He began by saying that he knew nothing about it and didn't want to, but it appeared that he had heard of the 6,000, and he admitted that he had been standing close by at the moment. As far as he could see, he didn't know how much money Mitya had in his hands. He affirmed that the Poles had cheated at cards. In reply to reiterated questions, he stated that, after the Poles had been turned out, Mitya's position with Agrafena Alexandrovna had certainly improved, and that she had said that she loved him. He spoke of Agrafena Alexandrovna with reserve and respect, as though she had been a lady of the best society, and did not once allow himself to call her Grushenka. In spite of the young man's obvious repugnance at giving evidence, Ippolit Kiryovich examined him at great length, and only from him learned all the details of what made up Mitya's romance, so to say, on that night. Mitya did not once pull Kalganov up. At last they let the young man go, and he left the room with unconcealed indignation. The Poles, too, were examined. Though they had gone to bed in their room, they had not slept all night, and on the arrival of the police officers they hastily dressed and got ready, realizing that they would certainly be sent for. They gave their evidence with dignity, though not without some uneasiness. The little Pole turned out to be a retired official of the 12th class, who had served in Siberia as a veterinary surgeon. His name was Musyorovich. Pan Vrublevsky turned out to be an uncertified dentist. Although Nikolai Perhotin asked them questions on entering the room, they both addressed their answers to Mikhail Makarovich, who was standing on one side, taking them in their ignorance for the most important person and in command, and addressed him at every word as Pan Colonel. Only after several reproofs from Mikhail Makarovich himself, they grasped that they had to address their answers to Nikolai Perhotin only. It turned out that they could speak Russian quite correctly except for their accent in some words. Of his relations with Grushenka, past and present, Pan Musyorovich spoke proudly and warmly, so that Mitya was roused at once and declared that he would not allow the scoundrel to speak like that in his presence. Pan Musyorovich at once called attention to the word scoundrel and begged that it should be put down in the protocol. Mitya fumed with rage. "He's a scoundrel, a scoundrel. You can put that down, and put down too that, in spite of the protocol, I still declare that he's a scoundrel," he cried. Though Nikolai Perhotin did insert this in the protocol, he showed the most praiseworthy tact and management. After sternly reprimanding Mitya, he cut short all further inquiry into the romantic aspect of the case, and hastened to pass to what was essential. One piece of evidence given by the Poles roused special interest in the lawyers. That was how, in that very room, Mitya had tried to buy off Pan Musyorovich and had offered him 3,000 roubles to resign his claims, 700 roubles down, and the remaining 2,300 to be paid next day in the town. He had sworn at the time that he had not the whole sum with him at Mokroe, but that his money was in the town. Mitya observed hotly that he had not said that he would be sure to pay him the remainder next day in the town. But Pan Vrublevsky confirmed the statement, and Mitya, after thinking for a moment, admitted, frowning, that it must have been as the Pole stated, that he had been excited at the time, and might indeed have said so. The prosecutor positively pounced on this piece of evidence. It seemed to establish for the prosecution that half, or a part of, the 3,000 that had come into Mitya's hands might really have been left somewhere hidden in the town, or even, perhaps, somewhere here in Mokroe. This would explain the circumstance, so baffling for the prosecution, that only 800 roubles were to be found in Mitya's hands. This circumstance had been the one piece of evidence which, insignificant as it was, had hitherto told, to some extent, in Mitya's favor. Now this one piece of evidence in his favor had broken down. In answer to the prosecutor's inquiry where he would have got the remaining 2,300 roubles, since he himself had denied having more than 1,500, Mitya confidently replied that he had meant to offer the little chap not money, but a formal deed of conveyance of his right to the village of Shermashnya, those rights which he had already offered to Samsonov and Madame Hohlakov. The prosecutor positively smiled at the innocence of this subterfuge. "And you imagine he would have accepted such a deed as a substitute for 2,300 roubles in cash?" "He certainly would have accepted it," Mitya declared warmly. "Why, look here, he might have grabbed not 2,000, but 4 or 6 for it. He would have put his lawyers, Poles and Jews, onto the job, and might have got not 3,000, but the whole property out of the old man." The evidence of Pan Musyorovich was, of course, entered in the protocol in the fullest detail. Then they let the Poles go. The incident of the cheating at cards was hardly touched upon. Nikolai Perhotin was too well pleased with them, as it was, and did not want to worry them with trifles. Moreover, it was nothing but a foolish, drunken quarrel over cards. They had been drinking in disorder enough that night, so the 200 roubles remained in the pockets of the Poles. Then old Maximov was summoned. He came in timidly, approached with little steps, looking very disheveled and depressed. He had, all this time, taken refuge below with Grushenka, sitting dumbly beside her, and now and then he'd begin blubbering over her and wiping his eyes with a blue check handkerchief, as Mikhail Makarovich described afterwards, so that she herself began trying to pacify and comfort him. The old man at once confessed that he had done wrong, that he had borrowed 10 roubles in my property from Dmitri Fyodorovich, and that he was ready to pay it back. To Nikolai Perhotinovich's direct question, had he noticed how much money Dmitri Fyodorovich held in his hand, as he must have been able to see the sum better than anyone when he took the note from him, Maximov, in the most positive manner, declared that there was 20,000. "Have you ever seen so much as 20,000 before, then?" inquired Nikolai Perhotinovich with a smile. "To be sure I have. Not 20, but 7, when my wife mortgaged my little property. She'd only let me look at it from a distance, boasting of it to me. It was a very thick bundle, all rainbow-colored notes, and Dmitri Fyodorovich's were all rainbow-colored. He was not kept long. At last it was Grushenka's turn. Nikolai Perhotin was obviously apprehensive of the effects her appearance might have on Mitya, and he muttered a few words of admonition to him. But Mitya bowed his head in silence, giving him to understand that he would not make a scene. Mikhail Makarovich himself led Grushenka in. She entered with a stern and gloomy face. That looked almost composed and sat down quietly on a chair offered her by Nikolai Perhotin. She was very pale, she seemed to be cold, and wrapped herself closely in a magnificent black shawl. She was suffering from a slight feverish chill, the first symptom of the long illness which followed that night. Her grave air, her direct, earnest look, and quiet manner made a very favorable impression on everyone. Nikolai Perhotin was even a little bit fascinated. He admitted himself, when talking about it afterwards, that only then had he seen how handsome the woman was, for, though he had seen her several times before, he had always looked upon her as something of a provincial hetera. She has the manners of the best society, he said enthusiastically, gossiping about her in the circle of ladies. But this was received with positive indignation by the ladies, who immediately called him a naughty man, to his great satisfaction. As she entered the room, Grushenka only glanced for an instant at Mitya, who looked at her uneasily. But her face reassured him at once. After the first inevitable inquiries and warnings, Nikolai Perhotin asked her, hesitating a little, but preserving the most courteous manner, on what terms she was with the retired lieutenant Dmitri Fyodorovich Karamazov. To this Grushenka firmly and quietly replied, "He was an acquaintance. He came to see me as an acquaintance during the last month." To further inquisitive questions she answered plainly with complete frankness that though at times she had thought him attractive, she had not loved him, but had won his heart as well as his old father's in my nasty spite, that she had seen that Mitya was very jealous of Fyodor Pavlovich and everyone else, but that had only amused her. She had never meant to go to Fyodor Pavlovich, she had simply been laughing at him. I had no thoughts for either of them all this last month. I was expecting another man who had wronged me, but I think, she said in conclusion, that there is no need for you to inquire about that, not for me to answer you, for that's my own affair. Nikolai Perhotin immediately acted upon this hint. He again dismissed the romantic aspect of the case and passed to the serious one, that is, to the question of most importance concerning the 3,000 roubles. Grushenka confirmed the statement that 3,000 roubles had certainly been spent on the first carousal at Mokro, and, though she had not counted the money herself, she had heard that it was 3,000 from Dmitri Fyodorovich's own lips. Did he tell you that alone, or before someone else, or did you only hear him speak of it to others in your presence? The prosecutor inquired immediately. To which Grushenka replied that she had heard him say so before other people, and had heard him say so when they were alone. Did he say it to you alone once, or several times? Inquired the prosecutor, and learned that he had told Grushenka so several times. Ippolit Kiryovich was very well satisfied with this piece of evidence. Further examination elicited that Grushenka knew, too, where that money had come from, and that Dmitri Fyodorovich had got it from Katerina Ivanovna. And did you never once hear that the money spent a month ago was not 3,000, but less, and that Dmitri Fyodorovich had saved half that sum for his own use? No, I never heard that, answered Grushenka. It was explained further that Mitya had, on the contrary, often told her that he hadn't a farthing. He was always expecting to get some from his father, said Grushenka in conclusion. Did he never say before you, casually, or in a moment of irritation, Nikolai Perhotin put in suddenly, that he intended to make an attempt on his father's life? Ah, he did say so, sighed Grushenka. Once or several times. He mentioned it several times, always in anger. And did you believe he would do it? No, I never believed it, she answered firmly. I had faith in his noble heart. Gentlemen, allow me, cried Mitya suddenly. Allow me to say one word to Agrafena Alexandrovna in your presence. You can speak, Nikolai Perhotin assented. Agrafena Alexandrovna, Mitya got up from his chair. Have faith in God and in me. I am not guilty of my father's murder. Having uttered these words, Mitya sat down again on his chair. Grushenka stood up and crossed herself devoutly before the icon. Thanks be to thee, O Lord, she said, in a voice thrilled with emotion, and still standing, she turned to Nikolai Perhotin and added, As he has spoken now, believe it. I know him. He'll say anything as a joke or from obstinacy, but he'll never deceive you against his conscience. He is telling the whole truth. You may believe it. Thanks, Agrafena Alexandrovna. You've given me fresh courage, Mitya responded in a quivering voice. As to the money spent the previous day, she declared that she did not know what sum it was, but had heard him tell several people that he had 3,000 with him. And to the question where he got the money, she said that he had told her that he had stolen it from Katerina Ivanovna, and that she had replied to that he hadn't stolen it, and that he must pay the money back next day. On the prosecutors asking her emphatically whether the money he said he had stolen from Katerina Ivanovna was what he had spent yesterday, or what he had squandered here a month ago, she declared that he meant the money spent a month ago, and that was how she understood him. Grushenka was at last released, and Nikolai Parfenovitch informed her impulsively that she might at once return to the town, and that if he could be of any assistance to her, with horses for example, or if she would care for an escort, he would be. "I thank you sincerely," said Grushenka, bowing to him. "I'm going with this old gentleman. I'm driving him back to town with me, and meanwhile, if you allow me, I'll wait below to hear what you decide about Dmitri Fyodorovich." She went out. Mitya was calm, and even looked more cheerful, but only for a moment. He felt more and more oppressed by a strange physical weakness. His eyes were closing with fatigue. The examination of the witnesses was, at last, over. They proceeded to a final revision of the protocol. Mitya got up, moved from his chair to the corner by the curtain, lay down on a large chest covered with a rug, and instantly fell asleep. He had a strange dream, utterly out of keeping with the place and the time. He was driving somewhere in the steppes, where he had been stationed long ago, and a peasant was driving him in a cart with a pair of horses, through snow and sleet. He was cold, it was early in November, and the snow was falling in big wet flakes, melting as soon as it touched the earth, and the peasant drove him smartly. He had a fair long beard. He was not an old man, somewhere about 50, and he had on a grey peasant's smock. Not far off was a village. He could see the black huts, and half the huts were burnt down. There were only the charred beams sticking up, and as they drove in, there were peasant women drawn up along the road, a lot of women, a whole row, all thin and worn, with their faces a sort of brownish color, especially one at the edge, a tall, bony woman, who looked 40, but might have been only 20, with a long, thin face, and in her arms was a little baby crying, and her breasts seemed so dried up that there was not a drop of milk in them, and the child cried, and held out its little bare arms with its little fists blue from cold. "Why are they crying? Why are they crying?" Mitya asked, as they dashed gaily by. "It's the babe," answered the driver, "the babe weeping." And Mitya was struck by his saying, in his peasant way, "the babe," and he liked the peasants calling it a babe. There seemed more pity in it. "But why is it weeping?" Mitya persisted stupidly. "Why are its little arms bare? Why don't they wrap it up?" "The babe's cold. Its little clothes are frozen and don't warm it." "But why is it? Why?" Foolish Mitya still persisted. "Why, they are poor people, burnt out. They've no bread. They're begging because they've been burnt out." No. Mitya, as it were, still did not understand. "Tell me why it is those poor mothers stand there. Why are people poor? Why is the babe poor? Why is the steppe barren? Why don't they hug each other and kiss? Why don't they sing songs of joy? Why are they so dark from black misery? Why don't they feed the babe?" And he felt that, though his questions were unreasonable and senseless, yet he wanted to ask just that, and he had to ask it just in that way. And he felt that a passion of pity, such as he had never known before, was rising in his heart, that he wanted to cry, that he wanted to do something for them all, so that the babe should weep no more, so that the dark-faced, dried-up mother should not weep, that no one should shed tears again from that moment, and he wanted to do it at once, regardless of all obstacles, with all the recklessness of the Karamazovs. "And I'm coming with you. I won't leave you now for the rest of my life. I'm coming with you." He heard close beside him Grushenka's tender voice, thrilling with emotion, and his heart glowed, and he struggled forward towards the light, and he longed to live, to go on and on towards the new beckoning light, and to hasten now, at once. "What? Where?" he exclaimed, opening his eyes, and sitting up on the chest as though he had revived from a swoon, smiling brightly. Nikolai Parfenovitch was standing over him, suggesting that he should hear the protocol read aloud and sign it, Mitya guessed that he had been asleep an hour or more, but he did not hear Nikolai Parfenovich. He was suddenly struck by the fact that there was a pillow under his head, which hadn't been there when he had leaned back, exhausted, on the chest. "Who put that pillow under my head? Who was so kind?" he cried, with a sort of ecstatic gratitude and tears in his voice, as though some great kindness had been shown him. He never found out who this kind man was. Perhaps one of the peasant witnesses, or Nikolai Parfenovich's little secretary, had compassionately thought to put a pillow under his head, but his whole soul was quivering with tears. He went to the table and said that he would sign whatever they liked. "I've had a good dream, gentlemen," he said in a strange voice, with a new light as of joy in his face. Chapter 9. They carry Mitya away. When the protocol had been signed, Nikolai Parfenovich turned solemnly to the prisoner and read him the committal, setting forth that in such a year, on such a day, in such a place, the investigating lawyer of such and such a district court, having examined so and so, accused of this and of that, and having considered that the accused, not pleading guilty to the charges made against him, had brought forward nothing in his defense, while the witnesses, so and so and so and so, and the circumstances such and such testify against him, acting in accordance with such and such articles of the statute book, and so on, has ruled that, in order to preclude so and so from all means of evading pursuit and judgment, he be detained in such and such a prison, which he hereby notifies to the accused and communicates a copy of this same committal to the deputy prosecutor, and so on and so on. In brief, Mitya was informed that he was, from that moment, a prisoner, and that he would be driven at once to the town, and there shut up in a very unpleasant place. Mitya listened attentively, and only shrugged his shoulders. "Well, gentlemen, I don't blame you. I'm ready. I understand that there's nothing else for you to do." Nikolai Parfenovich informed him gently that he would be escorted at once by the rural police officer, Mavrikyevich, who happened to be on the spot. "Stay," Mitya interrupted suddenly, and impelled by uncontrollable feeling he pronounced, addressing all in the room. "Gentlemen, we're all cruel. We're all monsters. We all make men weep, and mothers and babies at the breast. But of all, let it be settled here. Now, of all I am the lowest reptile. I've sworn to amend, and every day I've done the same filthy things. I understand now that such men as I need a blow of destiny to catch them as with a noose, and bind them by a force from without. Never should I have risen of myself. But the thunderbolt has fallen. I accept the torture of accusation and my public shame. I want to suffer, and by suffering I shall be purified. Perhaps I shall be purified, gentlemen. But listen, for the last time, I'm not guilty of my father's blood. I accept my punishment, not because I killed him, but because I meant to kill him. And perhaps I really might have killed him. Still, I mean to fight it out with you. I warn you of that. I'll fight it out with you to the end, and then God will decide. Goodbye, gentlemen. Don't be vexed with me for having shouted at you during the examination. Oh, I was still such a fool then. In another minute I shall be a prisoner. But now, for the last time, as a free man, Dmitri Karamazov offers you his hand. Saying goodbye to you, I say it to all men." His voice quivered, and he stretched out his hand. But Nikolai Parfenovich, who happened to stand nearest to him, with a sudden, almost nervous movement, hid his hands behind his back. Mitya instantly noticed this, and started. He let his outstretched hand fall at once. "The preliminary inquiry is not yet over," Nikolai Parfenovich faltered, somewhat embarrassed. "We will continue it in the town, and I, for my part, of course, am ready to wish you all success in your defense. As a matter of fact, Dmitri Fyodorovich, I have always been disposed to regard you as, so to speak, more unfortunate than guilty. All of us here, if I may make bold to speak for all, we are all ready to recognize that you are, at bottom, a young man of honor, but, alas, one who has been carried away by certain passions to a somewhat excessive degree." Nikolai Parfenovich's little figure was positively majestic by the time he had finished speaking. It struck Mitya that in another minute this boy would take his arm, lead him to another corner, and renew their conversation about girls. But many quite irrelevant and inappropriate thoughts sometimes occur even to a prisoner when he is being led out to execution. "Gentlemen, you are good, you are humane. May I see her to say goodbye for the last time?" asked Mitya. "Certainly, But considering, in fact, now it's impossible except in the presence of... Oh well, if it must be so, it must. Grushenka was brought in, but the farewell was brief and of few words, and did not at all satisfy Nikolai Parfenovitch. Grushenka made a deep bow to Mitya. I have told you I'm yours, and I will be yours. I will follow you forever, wherever they may send you. Farewell. You are guiltless, though you've been your own undoing. Her lips quivered. Tears flowed from her eyes. Forgive me, Grusha, for my love, for ruining you, too, with my love. Mitya would have said something more, but he broke off and went out. He was at once surrounded by men who kept a constant watch on him. At the bottom of the steps to which he had driven up with such a dash the day before with Andrei's 3 horses, 2 carts stood in readiness. Mavrikyevich, a sturdy, thick-set man with a wrinkled face, was annoyed about something, some sudden irregularity. He was shouting angrily. He asked Mitya to get into the cart with somewhat excessive surliness. When I stood him drinks in a tavern, the man had quite a different face, thought Mitya, as he got in. At the gates there was a crowd of people, peasants, women, and drivers. Trifon Borisovich came down the steps too. All stared at Mitya. Forgive me at parting, good people, Mitya shouted suddenly from the cart. Forgive us too, he heard 2 or 3 voices. Goodbye to you too, Trifon Borisovich. But Trifon Borisovich did not even turn round. He was perhaps too busy. He too was shouting and fussing about something. It appeared that everything was not yet ready in the second cart, in which 2 constables were to accompany Mavrikyevich. The peasant who had been ordered to drive the second cart was pulling on his smock, stoutly maintaining that it was not his turn to go, but Akim's. But Akim was not to be seen. They ran to look for him. The peasant persisted and besought them to wait. You see what our peasants are, Mavrikyevich. They've no shame, exclaimed Trifon Borisovich. Akim gave you 25 kopecks the day before yesterday. You've drunk it all and now you cry out. I'm simply surprised at your good nature with our low peasants, Mavrikyevich. That's all I can say. But what do we want a second cart for? Mitya put in. Let's start with the one, Mavrikyevich. I won't be unruly. I won't run away from you, old fellow. What do we want an escort for? I'll trouble you, sir, to learn how to speak to me if you've never been taught. I'm not old fellow to you, and you can keep your advice for another time. Mavrikyevich snapped out savagely, as though glad to vent his wrath. Mitya was reduced to silence. He flushed all over. A moment later he felt suddenly very cold. The rain had ceased, but the dull sky was still overcast with clouds, and a keen wind was blowing straight in his face. I've taken a chill, thought Mitya, twitching his shoulders. At last Mavrikyevich too got into the cart, sat down heavily, and as though without noticing it, squeezed Mitya into the corner. It is true that he was out of humor and greatly disliked the task that had been laid upon him. Goodbye, Trifon Borisovich, Mitya shouted again, and felt himself that he had not called out this time from good nature, but involuntarily from resentment. But Trifon Borisovich stood proudly, with both hands behind his back, and staring straight at Mitya with a stern and angry face. He made no reply. Goodbye, Dmitri Fyodorovich, goodbye. He had all at once the voice of Karpanov, who had suddenly darted out. Running up to the cart, he held out his hand to Mitya. He had no cap on. Mitya had time to seize and press his hand. Goodbye, dear fellow. I shan't forget your generosity, he cried warmly. But the cart moved and their hands parted. The bell began ringing and Mitya was driven off. Karpanov ran back, sat down in a corner, bent his head, hid his face in his hands, and burst out crying. For a long while he sat like that, crying as though he were a little boy instead of a young man of 20. Oh, he believed almost without doubt in Mitya's guilt. What are these people? What can men be after this? He exclaimed incoherently, in bitter despondency, almost despair. At that moment he had no desire to live. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Exclaimed the boy in his grief.